I've always been very close to the creative community. Like I'm still the designer that was doing stuff when I was 19 years old, his name Bill Brickley. I still work with him today. He's now like 72. He does all my newsletters for me. He was yelling at me at 19 and then 20, and I'm still sending him checks. And we've been together since 1979.
That's crazy.
He did typesetting on my first posters and stuff. And he worked at the Collegian in the typesetting room where you actually did type. But I'm still working with him. Patty, I've been working with her for 20 years. Jody, Kara, all these people for like decades, you know, and if anybody ever comes to my funeral, it's going to be the people that I've done projects with. Right. Employees will like do this to me, you know?
Right.
But it's always the empathy I have for the people who add so much value to the finished product, the magazine, the video, the social media post. I've just always had a love and appreciation for it.
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
Well, Greg Woodman, thanks for coming on the podcast. I'm super glad to have you here. I wanted to we've been talking and you've been helping me out and different teams of people that I've been working with out for like the last several years now. I feel like we're on like 4 or 5 already, which is pretty wild. But every time you talk and you say about how like, I need to do some video for this or video for that. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. What if I do this? And you're like, wow, no, I don't know if I want to do that exactly. I don't know about doing this over here. And I get it. Like I'm a little avant-garde with what I try to do. So it doesn't necessarily always track for each like market of people that might want to do something the way I would want to do them. But I still stand by the fact that after this episode comes out, the short form content that I'll get out of the things that you're going to say in the amount of span of time, whether it's an hour or 2, there will be so many different little audio nuggets out of that are super insightful and helpful. And that's the thing that I've just always valued about our conversations together, because I feel like you have this very open approach to, you can ingest anything and sit with it for a second and kind of come around with like a way that you would finesse or massage moving forward from there. And I feel like because you do that in a professional capacity, obviously on your own, it translates to being able to work with so many different types of clients, right? So obviously you're the CEO of Affinity Connection.
Yes.
What is your role for the Happy Valley Industries?
Well, Happy Valley Industry is a website that, since we tell stories, and at the core of what we do is amplify and accentuate positive stories.
At Affinity Connection.
At Affinity Connection.
Right.
We connect people to their affinity group. And so our core competency is connection. And we do it through storytelling, emotional storytelling. And so I have this team of writers. We live in Happy Valley State College, home of Penn State. And we used to own happyvalley.com and sold that to the local visitors bureau. And so I have this team of writers that love to tell stories. And I really feel that this area of the country is the greatest place to live, work, and play. And so since I couldn't cover tourism anymore, since I sold the rights to that website, I started Happy Valley Industry, which allows me and my team to sell the attributes of business owners like yourself who have a dream or solving some kind of business problem and creating a solution. And we love to amplify and tell that story.
So what's kind of the mission statement behind Affinity Connection and Happy Valley Industries? Because they are, like, you kind of almost just said it right there, but like to distill them into what, Affinity Connection is technically like one-sided. That's where the storytelling really aspect I feel like comes from. And I mean, for me being a videographer, the storytelling is one of my favorite. That's what I love most about, I don't know how I got into doing a lot of more documentary style filming and footage, but I really love it because it turns out like I've always loved stories, and that's probably a very primitive, like primal aspect of me in general. But I love that I'm doing it so much more in my life than I ever was before, and more than I ever thought I would. And so for me, it's easy to fall in love with capturing the story and finding a way to kind of finesse that into an edit that comes out that, for a client or whatever that does that job. And I'm doing a lot of that right now for KCF Technologies. I just wrapped on like 2 really big projects for them and for me career-wise that I'm really, really excited about. And they're about to be premiered at the June Summit next week at the State Theater. So I'm really excited about that. It'll be cool to see something I've worked on like a big theater screen. I'm afraid of what that's going to spark moving forward. But So the mission statement behind Affinity Connection, when I first met you, you're like, oh, it's data collecting and storytelling, or like your missions for that company.
Yes, I bought a company in the year 2000 that I was a customer of. In my alumni interest group, I was part of a social fraternity here at Penn State, and I was always impressed that I'd get the newsletter. This was before the internet, and I graduated in 1983, and so I'd get 2 newsletters a year, and the gentleman who was running the company always tracked me down, and I moved around a lot.
Okay.
But I'd always get my fraternity newsletter. So I was always intrigued. How does this guy find me? Because I'm not sending in address corrections, but he'd always find me and there'd be a newsletter about my fraternity.
Okay.
And there'd be class updates from all my brothers and new jobs, little baby, weddings. And I loved that little newsletter.
What fraternity were you in?
It was Kappa Delta Rho here at Penn State. You know, and so I had a career consumer marketing, did a lot of Penn State products, worked at Airwalk, headed up marketing. And when the Airwalk was sold, this company was available for my purchase.
Okay.
And I bought it because it had a core of databases and it had 200 clients of people who were part of an affinity group.
Okay.
Affinity group. And so I changed the name from Stuart Howe Alumni Service to Affinity Connection because I was into connecting people at a deeper level with their affinity group.
Yeah.
And the word affinity just means you're kind of in love with something.
Yeah.
You know, you have an affinity for video and podcasting and storytelling. And I have an affinity and have my whole career to understand why certain things make you feel good and why you fall in love and motives underneath that special feelings and emotions that, you know, Hallmark is really good at greeting cards.
Right. And movies.
And Pixar is really good, you know, and the people who make movies, you know, and why do they make me feel that way? You know, and so Affinity Connection, I changed the name. I want people to be connected at a deeper level to something they have self-identified that they love, this particular affinity group. And I said, after having a great career at Airwalk and traveling the world, I said that would bring purpose and meaning for the rest of my career. If I could go and interview members of affinity groups and find out, like, why do you volunteer to be a leader of this group? Why do you donate to this group? You know, why do you have special feelings and emotions when you come back for homecoming or you tailgate or have a golf outing?
Right.
And I just figured if I package the exhaust of these special feelings and emotions and published it through newsletters, websites, e-letters, podcasts, or whatever, it just moves people emotionally towards something deeper. And then at the byproduct of that is we are at fundraising, it becomes really easy.
Right, because you're connecting
deeper,
to people that are already attached to something that they're, you know, they have that affinity for.
And the secret is to ask questions. Like,
yeah, you're
why?
really good at that.
The secret is to ask questions like, why are you a volunteer of Boy Scouts? Like, why are you a volunteer at your church group? You know, why are you a volunteer at your fraternity? Or all the groups we have. We have a variety of groups, the rugby team, the football letterman, the hoops club. I mean, we all kind of self-identify of things that we have an affinity for.
Yeah.
And my job is to ask questions. Why? Why do you care so much? And then you just listen. And they tell you the most amazing stories, sometimes eyes mist up, tears. You know, I have one writer, Kara, that every time she's on a Zoom call with someone, she'll email me and said, 2 times they cried. 2 times. I mean, she keeps a scorecard of how she gets people emotionally. Like, can you ask a simple question like, how would you feel if this particular high school, insert high school name, happened to be a Catholic high school, would cease to exist? Which became a real situation for this one Catholic high school in Evansburg. And, you know, the people we'd interview, a lot of would tear up. And they'd say, not on my watch, or that would be devastating. You know,
right.
Society would be lessened because of that. There wouldn't be an alternative school. You know, faith wouldn't be taught to young people. You know, and so these motivated moments, I just like to capture them and then distribute them. And it becomes a snowball effect for people to be touched emotionally, to then respond through a question to them. Well, yeah, that's why I love this particular group, or I am who I am because I had the experience as an undergrad to be a part of this leadership development program. You know, so it's just chronicling, asking questions of why.
So then you sold happyvalley.com to the Visitors Bureau, and then you decided to kind of kick up. It's not like you wanted to stop telling that sort of like tourism style story of the area, because there's still a lot to tell. I know we were talking about working with Kren about helping them kind of redevelop how they want, or their branding and how they wanted to do that network. But essentially that's kind of, I feel like Happy Valley Industries kind of comes in as an excellent brand to kind of be the tell all for the stories in the area that kind of function to be what Happy Valley really is.
Exactly. And that's why we started it. There is happyvalley.com, a great website celebrating why you should visit this area, which is a great area to visit. Penn State football, great hotels, great restaurants, great country, mountains everywhere, biking trails, fly fishing.
Right. It's got so many different, I mean, you can be inside the town and feel like you're in a little city, and then go 15 minutes outside of town and you're literally in the country in any direction that you go
You're
in.
5 minutes to a mountain. You're 5 minutes, maybe 15 to fly fishing. They got Bryce Jordan Center, we got Beaver Stadium, we got great entertainment, all the attributes of a city, but you're living in a rural environment.
So what was like sort of like the call to you to develop the brand behind Happy Valley Industries?
Well, loved selling the why to visit. I've always had a particular direct relationship with Penn State alums. When I was an undergrad, I sold them Penn State novelty products, a cardboard figure of Joe Paterno. I did magazines. I identified as a college student that alumni have a very unique, special feeling and emotion for their university or college.
Yeah.
I mean, they become who they are during those formative 17 to 21 years, and they come of age and hitting bars and drinking and football and their best friends and their wedding. So I tapped in early that just going to tailgate at Penn State, selling T-shirts to them, that these people are insanely motivated and have an unusual, unnatural love for Penn State University, for Penn State football, for Joe Paterno, for the tailgates, for the community of picnicking every football game. And so I quickly realized that if I can sell products to these alums that stoke the flame of that passion, and I just came out with a series of products. And so happyvalley.com, when the internet happened, I quickly bought the name happyvalley.com.
It's the smartest move right then.
Right there, and I was going to have a website for alums to have reasons to come back.
Right.
To the Mecca, to the fountain of youth. And so back to your question about business is when I sold that, I wanted to then do the same thing for business, is that what makes up all the services to these alums and all the technical businesses like KCF Technologies, I wanted to, again, celebrate the entrepreneur spirit in the businesses in this community and accentuate the positives and amplify their story, because they're solving global problems like
KCF is,
KCF with, preventing downtime and saving General Motors and Ford and Toyota.
Machine health platforms are getting bigger and bigger.
And this is a sensor capital of the world here in Happy Valley, Industry 4.0, and we're a chromatography capital of the world. So I wanted to tell that story. Yeah. I love capturing stories like that and then distributing them often to Penn State alums. The people who are coming into Happy Valley Industry are those Penn State C-suite people who live around the country who do come back to visit, who may want to come back here and work, may want to come back here and buy a second home, certainly want to retire here, and I'm stoking the passion to come back to Happy Valley.
Yeah, I mean, you never know what that brings back into the area when they decide to do that later. I mean, if they retire and come back and like, you know what, I'm going to open that bakery I've always wanted to open, and they've got the capital to do that. They have more of an understanding for this area, and then you see these very boutique kind of shops that pop up that are, really only here and really special to here. I feel like another thing you've really done well is kind of distilling and capturing moments in the culture of Penn State alumni and fans in the area. And not that this is the direct one that I would go to normally, but that issue of Playboy that they did where they had the different girls. I don't know if it was Big Ten specific, but it was like from the different colleges. And I remember there being like some controversy around that in the area because a lot of people just associated immediately with being like, well, we don't want to be attached to that at all. But really what it does is put Penn State in the echelon with the rest of the world that is very much so like going to be paying attention to, the Playboy magazine, like print ads and stuff like that. I mean, by the time 2003 rolled around, whenever I graduated and could buy my first Playboy, I will say, very easily say that they are 90% advertisements with very little of what you think is in the magazine. And so for me, I remember that picture circulating around town. It was like a pretty popular poster that did you run that or did
I did a poster of two twins back in 1981. The company I had was called Happy Valley Promotions, and notice the name Happy Valley was kind of one of the first companies to use the word Happy Valley.
Nice.
And we put the word promotion on it. So anywhere I'm around, there's going to usually be some promotional angle. And
Right,
so
right.
my first product was Farrah Fawcett. Back then, well before you were born, was a big poster.
Oh, I remember this poster. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons in the basement with my friends, and their dad had that infamous poster on the wall.
And everybody can quickly, of my age, remember the poster. You can exactly see the suit and the hair.
Right.
And anyway, so my shtick, and I like to use that word, was to take something that was doing well nationally and localize it to Penn State. So I saw these two identical twins who were called the Ooh La La twins here at Penn State. They had a reputation
already
of being twins, which is always a good product angle, and then being blonde, and they were identical. Well, they weren't actually identical, but they were twins.
Right.
And Amy and Beth Sachs is their name. And I approached them and said, hey, I would love to do a poster like Farrah Fawcett poster, but with you on the Nittany Lion in wearing Penn State football jerseys. And they agreed to it. And I told them I would give them the jerseys and it would help their modeling career. And it'd be for their portfolio, these photos, that we'd give them all the photos.
Right.
Well, we did the poster and it just took off.
Of course.
It took off, and both of them came back to me with a lawyer.
Of course.
And I said, no problem. They wanted 10%, in which we made a deal. They got 10% royalties.
Yeah, but that's awesome for them.
The posters.
Even launching their career, that's awesome, right? Because now that puts in their brain like, hey, you know what? There's more than one way to traverse this. I want to be a model road.
And Amy, I believe, went on to be a model, and a really successful one. And the poster did very, very well. And
did it do better or worse than the Joe Paterno cardboard cutout?
The Joe Paterno cardboard cutout did better.
So, Joe Pa still got it.
That came out in 84. The Twins poster came out in 81.
They had a 3-year head start and they still couldn't take the lead.
Right. Now I got a lot of controversy around the poster, because I was a college student at the time, and I came out with a poster, and a lot of letters to the editor that it was not
in good taste,
but I did it in good taste. I thought
they
were clothed. They had jerseys on.
Absolutely,
the fall colors were in the background. An iconic Nittany Lion statue. It was fall. Fortunately, when we took the photo, the next week it snowed, or all those fall leaves would not have been there.
Yeah, it would have been got a more barren background for sure.
Right. And so that made it the fall colors. And anyway, so. That I did catch a lot of grief about that. And I don't necessarily show that product. I teach at Penn State now, and I would never show that product as part of my portfolio because it would seem like I'd be some kind of sexist, crazy.
Right. Well, yeah, you're encapsulated then with that era. And we have this weird issue in 2023, 2022, and 2020 and beyond, really, where it's like we try to hold people to today's standards based off of where culturally we were back then. And there's no way to kind of handle that outside of just being like, okay, I guess I have to apologize for who I was 20 years ago. Oh, by the way, we all grow and change a lot over 20 years. So to hold anybody to that is kind of absurd, I think, in my perspective and in mine. But like, it is just sort of a part of the zeitgeist and culture that we're dealing with today.
And I like that word zeitgeist, by the way. And I do want to say that I did try to do a male poster too. I had two brothers that I begged to do the poster with me, but they said, no, we're not going to do a poster.
What?
Yeah.
I feel like this is something we should revisit. I wonder if Penn State's gotten more stringent around what they allow.
Oh, they would never allow me. That was licensed product back then. They would never license that product now.
I don't know. They're licensing beer at the stadium now. I mean, how far we're not down the rabbit hole do we go? We got a casino maybe coming into the mall. I keep hearing. We might not be too far off from it. So I wanted to hear a little bit about some of the challenges you've had to overcome with Happy Valley Industries, because I don't interact with it as much, but I see this like really intrinsic potential to it, because I easily see it being sort of like this bedrock for where a lot of the I just know so many small business owners in the area that are a part of the culture of Penn State, and it doesn't matter whether if it's like a tattoo shop or a coffee shop or whatever. And so I feel like these companies need to be able to interact with one another and collaborate with each other in ways that are unique and interesting to kind of help each other out. And I feel like a rising tide raises all ships in that capacity, right? And so do you feel like you are getting it? Is it, I mean, you just kind of recently started that. When would you say you like really kicked it off?
We started it during COVID about 2 years ago.
Right. So it was like a soft launch.
It's still a very soft launch, is that I've been kind of spinning that, putting out a quality e-letter with quality writing, again, amplifying the positive aspects of local entrepreneurs doing and solving problems for consumers and companies. And but I have master plan to do exactly what you're saying, that it's a collective of all the 1,000 business owners in this town that we want to come together to amplify that this region is a great place to work and to attract talent, especially Penn State alums to come back and work in some of these technical companies or service companies, and then to band together and to market to companies to use our services and products here at Happy Valley, like KCF has done. We are very much involved with the early growth of KCF, where their summit of bringing everyone in from around the country, from these plant managers.
Yeah.
During Arts Festival week was genius. And people love to come back here. They'd bring their spouses. They'd really fall in love with the manufacturer, which is KCF Technologies, but also the environment, the area, their talent, and just the lifestyle. And I want to reach all the C-suite people around the world that Happy Valley is a great place to hire companies to solve your problems.
Yeah. And the thing is there's this wide range of the different types of companies that exist, right? Because we've got people in media and entertainment. We've got people in the science and tech field. We've got, food and beverage. We've got all these different aspects. And there are, as far as manufacturing goes, there are other manufacturing facilities in the area that kind of constitute being like a part of that. Have you thought about doing sort of like I don't know if we do it at the Days Inn or whatever, but like a convention, like a Happy Valley
Expo,
convention?
Sure. Convention. Yeah. I mean, a print publication, this podcast, video, whatever the modern tools are to get the story out about what is so special and unique about these companies that are really gritty Pennsylvania companies who are economically able to charge great value pricing because we don't have what happens in Silicon Valley,
right?
Or in now Austin, Texas. I mean, we can do things.
I know Austin is booming right now.
Booming, and here we are in Happy Valley, which could be the next Research Triangle, the next Austin. All the bones are here, all the ingredients are here for smart growth. It's a unique part of the world in Pennsylvania with its, just its heritage, and Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Scranton. I mean, it's a scrappy, gritty, applied science type of environment here with Penn State research, so all the ingredients are here. And from the sustainability and climate, we have water, we don't have hurricanes, we don't have floods. I mean, there's so many attributes that I always say, pinch me, I live in Happy Valley. And I'm so fortunate to be able to tell the story of Happy Valley industry or happyvalley.com or the companies that are here, because we have the wind at our back. We have all the ingredients of the next big thing, and it's happening. The demand is here. You can see the buildings going up, cranes everywhere. Why?
Right.
Because everyone loves Penn State and this research capital of the state, the darling of the state. And we have storytellers that just want to accentuate and beat the drum of all the assets that are here.
How many clients would you say you've worked with across the scale of Affinity Connection and Happy Valley Industries? Like if you could quantify in a different number of clients.
Well, there's been a kind of a rolling 200 core set of clients that we tell their story, and we maintain their data, and we maintain the communication schedule of 17 touches to keep people connected to the main mothership, if you will.
Well, do you have any like particular success stories from Affinity Connection of clients that you've worked with that you really feel like you've been able to sort of highlight the impact that organizations like Affinity Connection can have on a company like them?
Oh, sure. I mean, we have many, and they're always fun stories to tell because, we act as kind of a trusted advisor, as a coach, and if we were to coach you, Johnny, and let's say you won 3 gold medals at the Olympics, it would be you that earned the gold. I mean, it was you that swam the races and won the gold. So our clients who get gold medals, we are there to guide and support and coach them. So all the success goes to them. And our role is to guide them with kind of a proven process, which is quite simple to follow, is, find your North Star. What is your story? What are your values? What is the goal that we're trying to achieve here? And once we know the North Star through a creative briefing process and we're able to tell the story, then we use our methodology to go interview all the members to see how is this story resonating with you? What would you like to add to the story? And so once you have the story, the North Star, what's the goal here? And it's usually to connect people to deeper level back to that vision and that mission. And then we just, like I said, I use the word beat the drum. It's more tribal in a sense that, you're around the campfire and you're telling the story, and we do it often. We believe in frequent, consistent, 17 times a year. You're telling your story, you have a dialogue, you're getting feedback, you're asking for advice from the members, and we've seen when you follow this kind of very simple program and you're frequent and you're consistent and you're telling a meaningful story that moves you emotionally, amazingly millions of dollars when you ask those members to step up for something meaningful to them, like a refurbished new fraternity house or a new meeting place, or, whatever, a new high school for a new football stadium. We've raised millions of dollars from amazingly generous people who want to give to causes and things that are meaningful to them.
Right. It's easy to give whenever you feel passionately about something that you're seeing. Maybe it's not necessarily that it's up against the ropes, but you're like, oh, you know what? I have the opportunity to give back and in my own way help this thing that is so foundationally and core a part of my being excel and grow and expand.
Exactly. And so many stories of people and generous volunteers running these types of campaigns and donors who stepped up with the exact reason you said. They want to have impact. They want to pay it forward. They want to give back to something that gave so much to them. And we're trying to capture that story to kind of hold a mirror up that, yes, that I validate by what this story is, that it moves me emotionally. And people give money emotionally and they support it rationally. And people buy novelty products for the same reason. They buy consumer branded shoes for a reason. It says who they are. It's a part of their identity.
Yeah.
And I want to sport that logo because I identify with it.
In the new Spider-Man movie that just came out over the past week, there's a clip of the lead character at the very end of it is wearing an alternate version of these Air Jordans that were made specifically for this movie, but they're actually just like an alternate version of one that already existed. And so the marketing behind that is that this Spider-Verse is across multiverse style storytelling it gives them this like new and kind of like it's an interesting way to be able to be in touch with that, again, the zeitgeist of what people are digesting when it comes to media, and say, hey, we're still relevant and we don't have to do it by coming out with some big commercial, right? They can literally just do a product placement in a movie that's going to be huge.
Very powerful.
Yeah. Yes. And it really, it's funny because I've seen on TikTok, like the algorithm knows me. So like anything I watch or see, aside from the fact that it's spying on me, it has a good gauge of like what I'm interested in. So when I'm seeing certain things, I see a lot of stuff for like entrepreneurial leaders. There's like this influx of younger generation kids that are claiming to be entrepreneurs without any of the real accolades that kind of support that. You also teach the entrepreneurial leadership course at Penn State, which is technically an engineering course, but do you see any of that sort of there's just so many things I want to dive into here, but one of the things is like, we mentioned that Phi Kappa Sig is doing this like renovation project for their thing. And so we did their Founders Day meeting where I went over and I filmed, and as I'm there and I'm absorbing what I'm hearing and see what they're trying to expand, and they've got all the different visuals to kind of showcase what things are going to look like moving forward. One of the things that you've said that you've run into on your side of things is that the culture has shifted. Really, a lot of times these students want to come, and if they join a fraternity, it's not like they're trying to join it for life. They're joining it while they're here in college. And the era of the fraternity brother who leaves and then is like still stays connected to his fraternity over time and gives back and like, make these frequent visits outside of like a random homecoming weekend or whatever. That culture is kind of shifting and dying off a little bit. And it's partially probably because I feel like maybe that younger generation doesn't know how to hold on to that sort of long form version of nostalgia for a place in time, and that gets encapsulated by your period of time in college when you go to, university and then you pledge for a fraternity and you're a member for 4 years. So like, do you see some of those cultural shifts kind of impacting the entrepreneurial leadership space for like young entrepreneurs? And do you see a way to kind of like combat against that sort of dying off of that kind of culture? Because we had some tragedy that's happened here through the fraternity scene that is probably not, PR wise, very good for the fraternity scene. But to not latch onto that and say, how do we fix the culture here? I feel like that's kind of where you come in, is saying like, okay, but there's more to this story than what we saw in the movies in the 80s and 90s that kind of like embellished or glorified this or that over the other thing.
Boy, there's a lot in that question.
Yeah,
Johnny.
I know, but I feel like these are the things that I love when we talk about, because you are passionate about helping these fraternities in the first place, right? Because one, they're a client, so it's not that you're doing it in the bread and butter sense, but in the, okay, I've got a real kind of a problem to solve here on my involvement in how I help them, do their storytelling.
Right. Well, I'll try to answer the question. You mentioned I teach, and I've been teaching since 2006. And even since 2006, I've seen an evolution of the student at Penn State coming in, and things have evolved and changed. And you mentioned it's changed a little bit in the fraternities of people who are going into the fraternity. And I would say what's been fascinating to me in observing this is, at the core, humans are biologically driven to want to be with other humans. Yeah. And be tribal. And the biology drives us to want to have friendships and be part of something bigger than yourself. And so my observation is, when students are coming into Penn State or in a fraternity, they're coming in for a transaction. And you've read about a lot of this pop culture of Gen Z or whatever. It's more transactional than going in and sticking and being sticky and sticking and being there at a deeper level.
Right.
So I consider it transactional versus deeper meaning. But I'm happy to report, with some of the groups we've worked on and a lot of the students I've seen, even as most recently as the spring semester, they're yearning for deeper meaning.
That's good.
They're yearning for deeper friendships. And when they're exposed to it, they don't know necessarily how to describe it. You mentioned TikTok, you're getting these shots of dopamine all day long.
Right.
You're getting, because you guys grew up with this like dopamine 24/7, you're exposed to 8,000 messages a day. So you've just been dialogically rejecting it all because you can't let it all stick.
Yeah, it can't.
So you can't, or we just can't, our minds aren't equipped to handle it all.
Yeah, you can, I think, feasibly keep track of about 150 people in your brain. And when you have 200 clients, it's like, I'm going to need some help remembering certain people.
Well, and that's why I have a great team that goes deep, and I think that the answer is that I've been happy to see that people, when exposed to deeper friendships and deeper meaning, and even in my classroom, by the end of the semester, the students are saying, I had no idea that I could get so close to all of my fellow classmates. And my class is just 30. And I have them at the end of the semester talk about highlights from the semester, and I have them give me their life plan, and they have to share it with the whole class. But it is like a kumbaya party, the last class, because these kids break down why this has been one of the most enjoyable classes they've ever taken in their whole career. And they speak to the emotional connection they have with their fellow students and the friendships they develop working on cases together. And I think a lot of them are going to stay together as friends for life, perhaps.
In some capacity, right?
And maybe start businesses together, or, be a part of a team. But it is just fun as an old timer who's in this affinity connection business in a campus that every time they're trying to solve a problem, because I have them see a need, fill a need. What problems are you seeing out there? Since 2006, and it's getting worse and worse, and you can read it, this mental health issue, at the core of a lot of it is loneliness.
Yeah.
So the paradox of this affinity connection or being around a campfire is people want friendship. It's been proven. If you have friends, it's so much more positive on your health. Without friends and you're lonely, it's equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And it's been proven by scientists.
Yeah, we've got the empirical research now to back that up.
Our need biologically for companionship and friendship, so I try to stoke the fire in my class that whether you're from Saudi Arabia or from China or South Korea or Belfont, we're going to put you on teams. We're going to work together, and these kids, I always say it's like putting lemon pledge furniture polish on an old piece of furniture. It just gets soaked up really quick.
Right.
Young people will soak up meaning.
Well, they're yearning for it, right?
They're yearning
And I think the reason for that
Deep level
is that people are constantly, like you said, like when you're being, inundated and being sold to constantly, it shifted the way that marketing and sales is really kind of handled. And in large part, it's because there's that period of, I mean, if you watched Mad Men at all, so like that kind of feeling of like, how do we get in touch with people and sell them without knowing we're selling them? Well, that is what you're always going to have to do to kind of sell people, I think. But it's gotten worse in our generation because now we are so beyond like trying to be sold a product. Like we are more interested in the transparency behind things.
Yeah, deconstruct.
Yeah, and the younger generations are actually even more interested in like the ecological impact that these companies have. So that guides a lot of their purchasing directions and things like that. Do you, in the class, whenever you do the teams, I feel like you do a really good job of when they're in these classes. I remember in my undergrad, if I got put into a group of people for group work, that was like, you might as well just shoot me in the foot now, because I'm the guy who always ends up having to rein all this in and make sure things get done. And if you get in a team with people that aren't really pulling their weight, you can kind of get the short end of the stick really quickly on this project where everybody's grade is attached to it. But I feel like you probably don't suffer from that because of that cultivation of meaning and the connecting experience that you kind of put them through and through the paces of your class.
Well, the curriculum's on leadership, entrepreneurial leadership. And so these cases of what you've identified does happen. But since it's a leadership class, we're giving them a toolkit of how to understand why that laggard teammate is dumping all the work on you.
Right.
And why they're not responding to the group text and why they're not showing up in meetings. It's an opportunity to learn how to be a leader.
Yeah. I mean, that's a real leader experience, right?
Right. And most of the A students who are just freakishly A plus 4.0 students, they naturally come into the class thinking leadership is, well, I'm just going to do the whole thing myself.
Right.
And these three bums, they're all C students. I'm an A student. I'm getting an A. I'm getting into grad school. I'm going to Princeton.
Yeah, lucky them being attached to this ship. Like,
yeah, and I'm just going to do it. But no, they have to learn. And we have peer reviews. We make people sign contracts on the team. It's a learning example of when you have a laggard, of how you have to learn to understand why they're a laggard, and then coach and be an advisor to them to get them back into the fray and make sure they do their work. So there's leadership, there's management. You're dealing with a technician that has to do their slides. That's the learning opportunity where these kids really learn a lot. It takes the thesis of our curriculum. They have to go practice it. And then they have to circle back and say what they learned. And through that, everything that you said, when you think of a team project, everybody has hellacious
horror stories for sure.
And now when you get the peer review where somebody does say, hey, I did all the work, I should get the A, they should get all C's. We have to talk then about, well, what happened here? What's the learning opportunity here?
Yeah, because there is still something to be learned, even if this is the peer review end of the class situation.
Right.
There's some serious takeaway here that has long lasting impact in your life if you figure it out now.
Right. And since I teach the class based on all the mistakes I've made in my career, this little discussion we just had has been the bane of my existence on why I'm not further along on making an impact in what I have done in my career, is my inability to fully understand at a younger age. And I'm working round the clock now to understand the dynamic between humans and how we're all hardwired differently.
Right.
We all come at a project with different points of view, and we all have to mix together. That's why diversity is very important, to come together to do something bigger than all of us individually can do together.
Yeah.
And that human soft skill stuff is what employers are really seeking, and why many people get a job based on their experiences in my class, because it's real world. We make it really real world because I'm walking across the street from the real world of meeting payrolls and dealing with wacky humans like you on trying to come together to do projects. It's the soft skills that keep those things going.
Do you have to find a way then to distill that sort of teaching experience for these fraternities when you're trying to help them reinvigorate how to get the younger brothers that are in the place now to be more connected in a long-term sense? Is that like a part of like sort of the dynamic you would explore?
Yeah, that's part of our advisory role, best practices, how to work with the undergrads, how to get when we have to get the information from the undergrads and teach them how to understand their writing for their alumni audience.
Right.
I mean, just teaching people like, who's your audience before you write something.
Right.
be surprised at how a lot of people just don't know that naturally.
Or that it's not a part of a question that they ask themselves when they're formulating this thing they're trying to do, which is storytelling. It's like, but storytelling implies that there's an audience that's going to be listening. So who is this audience is very important.
And it's not your 19-year-old roommate.
Right. Despite your best inclination to believe that that's the case.
Understand that it's going to be a 68-year-old guy that was in this fraternity in 1958, where they dressed in a blue blazer and came down and sang songs around a piano and had a formal dinner with waiters who served it. You guys are eating in your room, Hot Pockets.
Right.
You're not eating together, and you're out, some of you are playing Frisbee out front, and you're eating at all different times.
Right.
I mean, you're writing for a guy that has this vision of this fraternity that was a castle to him.
Right.
And to you who live in a house probably at home as big as this house in your McMansion.
Yeah.
We were all poor Penn Staters, These guys are driving their very expensive cars we didn't have cars in a parking lot. So we have to teach them, like we walked, nobody had a car. It was 42 guys living in a fraternity. Jim Addisy had a car, and we all just had
piled into that if we needed to go get groceries.
Yeah, he was the guy that had the car. And now there's 48 spots. You paved over the side yard because everybody's got a late model car.
Right.
You're writing for that guy. Are you sure you want to say that?
Yeah.
And as you know, as a storyteller, it's like, who's your audience?
Yeah. Super important.
If you're going to do a website and it's going to be for sorority women, don't make it accessible by the 68-year-old guy because he's not going to understand what you're posting.
Right. The information doesn't translate.
And if you're going to make an Instagram rush video, my God, don't be jumping out of the windows and all that kooky shit.
Right.
I have to like retell that story.
Did that happen?
That happens all the time.
You're like, what is it? Wednesday? It happened yesterday.
Because if you're 19 and you're trying to recruit like-minded people like you're going to do a rush video, which is a recruitment video, and put it on Instagram that they forget is going to be seen by the 1,000 members who are funding that property.
Right.
That you're a tenant in as a new brother. And just these little stories is at the hallmark of what we do for a living, is we teach, like, you're writing a story for whom and what's the point of view of your audience.
Yeah.
And that's what we teach the students too. We're all raised to be me, myopic. It's all about you're seeing life from your point of view.
Yeah. But this is my lens.
And when you're telling a story, it's got to be from who is your audience.
So given that you've gotten all this different experience through the entrepreneurial leadership class with meeting people and in your own professional experience, what do you think are some of the key qualities or skills that like successful entrepreneurs need to possess to really kind of go from being like the idea guy who can like, I know tons of guys that are like this, like, I got this great idea. I've got this brilliant idea and no idea how they're going to execute on it. It's just pie in the sky or, some vision that they have. So like there are things that it takes beyond being able to generate interesting ideas to become a successful entrepreneur. And I'm curious to see what you would distill that down to in the experiences of people that you've met through class and through your own personal professional experience.
Well, that's an easy answer for me, because this is what I've been teaching since 2006, and I've certainly read and have experienced in my own career. There's a lot of idioms like see a need, fill a need. And I believe in that, fail fast, fail forward.
Yep.
My students hear these things over and over and over.
I wish that was one I had learned earlier in life. I feel like I was so afraid to fail because failing felt like it was going to be embarrassing. And the reality is nobody escapes failing. You have to be able to eat crow and realize like, okay, that doesn't work the way I thought it would. I need to just move on to the next idea and not get stuck on this thing failed. And people, I guess, like kind of mentally put everything in one basket whenever they try things sometimes. And then if it, falls apart, they're like, oh, well, then I guess I wasn't meant to do this. It's like, no, you were meant to learn from this because there's about 30 different things you could have done differently that would have altered the course of how this turned out. And you need to figure out what those things are.
Right. And failure equals learning. And it's empirical knowledge that the more successful people that we read about or study, if you go back and analyze how they got there, they will proudly proclaim it was their failures along the way. And there have been many along the way for most of these brand names that you hear about, or these iconic entrepreneurs that
Steve Jobs is a classic example.
They have series of failures. Walt Disney went bankrupt multiple times. Milton Hershey, bankrupt multiple times. You can look through any guide of anybody, and it's because of their failures they learned. So you see a need, feel a need. You have to. There is this myth that there's ideas in the shower that launch businesses. And again, myth. There's so many perceptions and myths, even about leadership and management, that there has to be a problem that you're solving.
Right.
And that's through customer discovery. And is the problem big enough that somebody would pay you to solve it?
Right.
In a product or a service. And so 9 out of 10 businesses fail, and that's a fact, because they don't fully do customer discovery of discovering that the problem is big enough that someone would pay you to solve it and bring them pleasure.
Yeah.
Somebody is only going to give you money if you're solving a pain point for them.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you go out and do a Google survey to 100 people, like, what do you think of my idea? They're going to say, yeah, it's a great idea. Go, Johnny, go do that. Well, that's not a good question. How much would you pay me to have this?
Right.
And let's do a minimal viable product, which is a test product, to say, buy it now from me.
Right.
And then you're going to get a lot of truth. Well, I'm not going to really pay $1 for that app. If it's free, maybe, or, I can do that probably on my own. Or, you want to do a food service for me? Well, I can go to Sam's Club and get all those ingredients and do it for 1/5 the price of you.
Right.
And so it's all about being vulnerable and not being afraid of failure, to learn and test and do minimal viable products. It's like you with this podcast, This is a minimal viable product that you have now on YouTube and your Spotify, and you're learning each time where your audience is. But ultimately, your audience is going to make or break you if they're entertained and they're learning something and they're sharing it and they're commenting or hitting the bell or whatever.
Ring that bell, like and subscribe.
Yeah, all that stuff, and do this, do that. You're in the game now and you're vulnerable. You have Collab or die. And, I applaud you, because I work upstairs and I'll scratch my head and say, what the hell is Johnny doing? Is there an audience for this?
Yeah.
And I've now seen a couple of your episodes, and you have a wide variety of people from music and industry and goofball like me. And I'm saying, well, who's the audience for this? And is this going to work? But I'm applauding you secretly, saying this guy's testing something.
Yeah.
He's giving me the blueprint. So when I want to do something like this, I'm going to borrow and steal, and then do my target market, which might be entrepreneurial leadership or storytelling. I'm really curious, and that's why I'm going to sit here for an hour or two and just be a part of your, what I call, grand experiment.
Yeah.
Will it be successful? Will you be getting checks every month? Because I hope so. But the good news is you're getting smarter every time you do it.
Yeah. And I think for me, I adopted that a little later in life than I would have preferred. But it's one of those things that when you really do absorb that lesson, like truly, and internalize it, you carry it with you, and it becomes a very, very major part of how you're going to function moving forward, and all the things that you do with either that project or the next one. And for me, I guess I just kind of looked at it like, what's really always been fascinating to me is that I have so many friends that exist in every corner of the globe, and they're all doing something different, but they've all met me at some point.
You're the common thread.
I'm this common thread between a lot of people. And some of them are, super successful entrepreneurs, billionaires. Some of them are just musicians. Some of them are music photographers. Some of them own a coffee shop. Some of them own a martial arts school. Some of them own, they're just in every aspect. And in conversations with them, I find that the thing that kind of is the unifying thread between everybody is that they're all just putting forth the effort and going after the thing that they believe in their heart of hearts is what they're supposed to be doing. And we all face a lot of these same trials and tribulations in the process of going after that. And so I just kind of always found it interesting that I always saw these parallels between people that would never meet each other. There'd be no scenario. I mean, if they did, it'd be an astronomical anomaly. But if they were to, they would see how much they had in common in two totally different worlds. And that always really kind of fascinated me. And I guess it kind of just marinated long enough that I finally decided, you know what, I am going to try this podcast. I don't want to necessarily focus on just artists. I want to be able to focus on the entrepreneurial space. I want to focus on people that are in the tech space or in the, in the art world also. And that art world itself is also, acting. I had James Tierney on the other week that he's running the Blue Brick Theater, and he's, you've worked with him, and just all these different people have these not necessarily grandiose visions, but they've got lofty goals that I think a lot of people will get talked out of by their parents or their friends or their social circle. Will be like, are you really trying to do that? Or isn't that a little self-serving? Or don't you feel like you're just kind of like me-ing it or whatever? And the reality is, like, I don't see that. I see these people that are taking their shot in the dark and trying to make the best of everything they can as they go along and learn when they can. And I have friends that I look at that in their entrepreneurial endeavors, I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, I don't know why why would you try this? But I'm like, you know what? That's your mistake to make. And I enjoy the conversations we have in between those mistakes where I hear what you're learning, and then I can internalize some of the stuff that you're learning for things that you've tried that I haven't tried that parallel something I'm going after. So like, it's just one of those things where I just never really, I didn't set out to do the podcast and focus on how successful it would be. I set out to do the podcast in a way that I would enjoy doing it, that I would be able to be consistent doing it, because I think that is the other part of this that is the most fundamentally important, is not just doing it, but doing it consistently and being able to have consistent releases coming out. And in doing this, it is like there was a period between back cataloging 8 or 9 episodes where I started launching. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to wait to get these all out. I do one a week for the next 2 months. I want to get like 5 out now, so people, if they don't like the first one, they can switch to the second episode or whatever. And so I'm just constantly trying new things and being like, maybe I don't have to release it on Wednesday every day. Maybe it's actually better for me to release on Thursday when there's less traffic being, for podcasts and stuff like that being released, and that might help with getting attention. Well, I got the attention of Spotify, and they asked me to do an insert ad break for Spotify for podcasters, which is what their company Anchor FM was, where I started the podcast at, branched over into podcasting. Spotify for podcasters is like the app, and so I wanted to kind of tell my story and be like, look, like, this is an app that if you're a person who's trying to start a podcast, you can literally record and do your episodes from your phone, and a little bit of equipment along the way can increase the quality of your podcast. You don't have to do a video podcast to do a podcast, but you do have to do, audio at the very least. So if you've got the means of doing that from your phone, which everybody almost essentially does, it's an app that I think it helps people get out there. And there's so many different types of podcasts. There's like true crime podcasts and like these style conversational ones. There's like current event podcasts. So I don't know what space I'll inevitably find myself in, but I'm very interested in the journey, and I enjoy these same conversations I would have with you if you had a spare hour or two to sit down and talk with me. And in the times that we have, I've always found like a lot of great value in the things that you say, because you come from a different world than I do when it comes to the way you operate a business. But certain things that I would say maybe I didn't realize were still true are like bedrock true in the world of entrepreneurial, growth and experience.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that background on you actually doing a podcast on YouTube, audio and video, and learning, and who knows where it's going to spider web out. And maybe having all the guests come together in a party would be kind of fun, or we get to know each other.
Right. Yeah.
And you're the common thread. And back to what I was saying about entrepreneurs, and you are an entrepreneur. You have the freedom to choose your own schedule. You have your own business. This is an extension of your video business, and I applaud that. But what I really try to drive home is, I think this podcast and the video is that you want to give to an audience, a still undetermined audience of how big it'll be or how small it'll be. But I think at your basic level, which is consistent, I have seen around entrepreneurs, they're really moved to solve a problem. And I'm assuming you're moved a little bit to have the common thread, you and all these crazy people that have intersected with you that you've enjoyed collaborating with, collab or die, is that you felt this need to interview all these people and share it with the public. Yeah,
because there's great things. I mean, like I said, when we sit down and we've had any conversation, I'm like, we should have just shut up and recorded this whole damn thing, because you said 2 or 3 things that I think are really, really important for most people to hear. But specifically, it pertains to me right now. But in my head, I'm thinking of the 6 people I know that are doing things similar to me or whatever. They're hitting these same obstacles. Do you see I guess sort of like common obstacles that entrepreneurs come up against that are really difficult for them to kind of overcome?
Well, and a lot of it's philosophical.
No, I think you're right. Definitely.
Growth-minded versus fixed-minded. Well, and what I was trying to get to is, I think you're a giver. Yeah. And I try to teach entrepreneurship is for givers, not takers. That you have to, I'm convinced Steve Jobs, when he was giving a better computer interface than Microsoft was offering. He became super rich, but at the core, what motivated him and Wozniak is they wanted to solve a problem, and they just moved towards that North Star. They were givers. They weren't in it to get rich.
Right.
Most people who are rich did not get into it to get rich, but they got into it from their heart of this problem bothered them so much, having beds delivered and you had to like leave work at 2:00 in the afternoon. Why can't we have a bed in a box that can be shipped in UPS that's folded?
Right. And unrolls, and then I can put it in there whenever I want to. I don't have to be there to meet the delivery guy.
Every great, cool little story of entrepreneurship is there were a few wacko guys or women, men, or whatever deciding that we should solve this problem. We should have an alternative to what is status quo. They're givers, they're not takers. And then they get rich and then they start doing TED Talks and stuff. But at the core, they're givers. And I teach students that too, is the problem big enough? Are you moved enough to want to solve it? Do you want to spend the next 5-10 years solving it, failing fast, failing forward, pivoting, changing, getting feedback,
filling a need,
being vulnerable, turning down your $90K engineering job because you feel really passionate about solving this problem? Those are the kind of the criteria of, even if my own children wanted to do something, I would ask those kind of questions. Are you ready to sign a 5-year lease? Most people are going to try something for 2 months. Well, you got to sign a year lease? I was just going to try this.
Right.
Well,
right.
Okay, then abort, but you got to, every line is like this to get to success.
Yeah.
You got to go backwards. You got to go through the shadow of darkness. There's graphs, but it's all between your ears on the philosophy of what you're doing.
What's a helpful philosophy you think that keeps people from maybe getting trapped at an obstacle? Sometimes my obstacle is as dumb as, all I got to do is send out this invoice and I can get paid. But for whatever reason, I can find every reason to get to that computer or to not go and sit down at that computer and type that up and send it, even though that's the job is done, the work is done. Just send this invoice to go get paid. So that's like a dumb obstacle that I would say is one that sometimes catches me. But what is sort of like your philosophy behind getting people to not get trapped on these obstacles that can sometimes they're like a minor hindrance, but sometimes that minor hindrance can be enough to just blockade somebody? Yeah.
Well, it is a philosophy, and I call it an entrepreneurial mindset. And you described it quite aptly on starting this podcast. You went through a series of verbs and nouns there that said that ultimately you just did it.
Yeah.
And you kind of, you're not feeling too vulnerable if you have to pull the plug on it. You're not, you might change it. You might, but it's an adventuresome attitude of, I'm going to see what happens. I'm going to get after it. I'm going to do the toughest step is the first step to just do it.
Yep.
You got enough research. You studied it long enough, and then you just did it. And now you're going to get smarter and smarter and smarter. And even if you pull the plug on it, you'll now be able to probably sell expertise on how to do a podcast and how to not fail on it. I mean, you're not going to go wrong on it. And the worst thing can happen is it's part of you did it.
Right. Yeah.
And so many people get trapped in their analysis paralysis and the what ifs and what could, and we get frozen. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt makes us all weak.
Yeah.
And we keeps us from ever being vulnerable. Back to my students that I've noticed, a lot of them go to formals and dances alone with their friends. They don't ask the opposite sex out or the same sex or whatever. They don't ask for dates.
Because they fear the vulnerability of having to go out there and ask that?
Exactly. They're risk averse. And I'm teaching a class where you got to put your fear aside. Fear is learning.
Yeah.
But for them to say, hey, I'm going to ask somebody they just introduced into my class, hey, I'm going to a formal. Let's just go as friends. They'd rather go with their two buddies and just have fun with themselves.
Right.
But they set up the schedule that we're supposed to have a formal, we're supposed to have an end of year event. You're supposed to get a date. Yeah. And there are statistics that this generation is dating less than ever.
Yeah, they're having less sex than ever before. A lot of things. I think for me, that comes true when I think about one of my favorite adages that I learned maybe a decade ago that I really kind of kept close to me is that if you don't ask, the universe can never tell you yes. And that was the thing that held me back. There were things like, I don't want to go up and talk to this person. I feel like I don't want to bother them, or I don't want to this. Like whatever reason I could come up with, it would just be a reason why I just wouldn't even bother asking. That opportunity cost is that I never gave myself the ability in a lot of cases to be able to be told yes. And then you play this devil's advocate game. You're like, well, let's see if I ask this person this thing and see how this goes. In every facet of my life, if I make the effort if there's something I'm looking for a yes on, or I'm curious to see if I can get it into my life, I just go and do it at this point. Because it's almost always worth it. It's like, even if I miss 80% of the time, if I didn't do it any percent of the time, I couldn't have gotten those 20% that said yes.
And that's the entrepreneurial mindset. That is fail fast, fail forward, minimal viable product. If the person you ask says no, it's a learning moment. Like, well, I'm obviously not attractive enough, or I'm not cool enough, or I'm not giving the vibe, my personality. This person is not saying yes to me. Why is that?
Yeah.
And through those rejections in my own career, it helped me do some other things. I'm probably an entrepreneur because I was probably rejected in asking for dates and stuff. I figured I better stand out a little bit. I better start doing some wacky stuff to have some attention on me, get my name in the paper. Biology was probably driving me in my entrepreneur days. And biology is to procreate.
You're like,
it is.
And to some degree, I am doing that.
And so back to the statistics that I'm reading about not dating, not having sex, not taking chances. And I'm teaching a class about overcoming your fear to start a business and to be a leader. And we teach that there's a fear of success.
Yeah, that's weird because you don't look at it like that. Because at the forefront of it, your fear is I might fail. Mm-hmm. But the other fear that they don't realize they're suffering from is I might be successful. And then what if I can't keep up with that?
Well, and then you got this imposter syndrome or whatever.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a clinical thing for everything. But I teach, like, there are like 6 fears we have. And I have them all, believe me, like fear of success. Well, why is there fear of success? Well, then I'm going to have to do the project myself. Then everybody's going to expect me to be the star.
Or I got to maintain.
I got to maintain. We all play small, because of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We don't want the spotlight on us.
Right, you said risk aversion, right? Like you're like, if I don't try to do this too big, then I can't fail too big. So like
we don't want to be vulnerable. And I love this generation. I think these kids are smarter than ever, but this issue of taking some risks and being vulnerable and not being embarrassed, and even interns emailing me has become a challenge for interns. And I'll sit down and say, well, why didn't you email me? Well, I didn't think my email was professional enough, or I didn't want to bother you, or I didn't want to jam up your Outlook email. And I'm going, but just email me, text me. They don't even want to communicate. And I don't mean to generalize, but I'm saying even at a fundamental level of being afraid that your email is not going to be grammatically professionally written, they'll not do it
altogether, right?
They'll just won't email, and they'll just keep me in the dark. And I say, text me, email me, keep me informed. And it's like, put me on the CC when you're talking to clients. It's like there's a fear, and it's on me probably because maybe I get too excited and you want to keep me in the dark.
You're an excitable person.
Right. So let's keep Greg in the dark. Well, again, at the fundamental level, is it fear? Is it uncertainty? Is it doubt? And it's between our ears that makes us paralyzed by analysis. And we're really good at telling stories to ourselves that are often inaccurate.
Yeah. So you mentioned Steve Wozniak earlier when we were talking about Steve Jobs. I have 1 degree of separation between he and I, and it's my mentor, Jeff Hoffman, who is an entrepreneur. And I always loved that, like, when I would message him, he would like not get back to me for like days, sometimes weeks. And I asked him at one of our like quarterly meetings that we would get together in like a restaurant out in Ohio, and we would meet up. He would be like, oh no, like, I need you to understand, don't hesitate to email me. Like, if it takes me a while to get back, don't feel like you're bothering me. He was like, I've been on every board of advisors for every president since like the Clinton administration. So for you to feel like you're bothering me, I just have a lot of things at play constantly. So it's really an attention grabbing game.
Right.
And so it's not that he's not getting a hold of me this time or this week or whatever because of this, that, and the other thing. It's just because he's like, I've got enough on my plate, and I'm here to be here for you as a mentor and to help guide you and maybe do this thing or that thing together. But I don't want you to feel like if you're ever hesitating to email me or shoot me a message, he's like, don't. You should just do it and keep doing it until I do finally get back to you.
Right.
And I realized that I was also guilty of that. Like, I would have people that would reach out and want to do something or try to get me to be involved in this project or that project. And I would just simply be like, okay, or I'd open it and I'd get busy and I'd stop. And I realized that I let a couple of projects slip through the cracks that way. And him telling me that helped me realize, I'm like, oh, I actually need to let people know that they're not bothering me too. Because you would see that there would be a dip off in messages or emails or whatever from somebody. And sometimes it's just, you have to be able to acknowledge the power of persistence sometimes. And that's like a way that you can kind of combat that feeling of being like, I'm bothering them, is to realize, hey, they actually have a lot of things going on. So don't hesitate to follow up.
Right. Yeah, because I get 1,000 emails a day.
I can't even imagine what your computer looks like every
and
day.
then some get caught in junk, some are focused and unfocused, and I need people to be persistent, and, because it means it's important to them, and they got to, and a lot of the stuff that I dispense in kind of these answers, I'm turning 65 next week. And I'm still working at all of these things on my own fears, my own uncertainty and doubt, my own fear of success. So I tell the students, just because I'm got gray hair and I'm 65, I'm working on the same stuff that we're working on together during the semester.
Right. You kind of feel like at some point you're going to get all this under wraps and you're going to understand it and operate at nominal efficiency. And really it's like, no, this is just an ongoing Rolodex of game playing that you're going to be doing to figure out and navigate all this psychological and philosophical issues that you're going to run into in your career.
Yeah, it's like Lewis and Clark. We're just in an expedition, going across. We have a lot of competition out there. There's chaos. The market's changing. COVID hits. Employees' mindsets change. You just got to be cat-like and agile. So a lot of the stuff that I work with students on, or I'm even talking on this, is, I get paralyzed. What you're doing with this podcast is what I'm doing with Happy Valley Industry. It's not my core business. I'm experimenting, I'm testing, I'm putting a little time into it.
But you see the intrinsic value in it existing in the first place, and knowing there's a time and a place and a place where its growth might actually,
And I want to hit the accelerator. Like in about 3 months, I really want to hit the accelerator. I want to offer up these video services. I want to offer storytelling for all these clients. I want to pull them all together, have a summit, like you said, an expo, and really have all boats rise. And I'm just waiting. And again, I have to say, what am I afraid of? Why am I not doing this? Why am I rationalizing that I'm too busy over here? Why don't I just do it?
Well, sometimes there's like the line of sight of realizing like, okay, for me, if I'm looking at this hypothetical expo, right, I know the amount of work that needs to go on between where I'm at right now, where I see that date approaching,
right,
in the ether, and getting there. And there's a lot of stuff that have to go in between there. And sometimes I feel like it's easy to internalize and say, I've got to do all this myself, even knowing you've got a team of people to help you. And that can sometimes be like, the thing that kind of holds you up a little bit.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you see a space where do you see like opportunities for different businesses in just like this area, which I would say is sort of like a microcosm of many, cities and towns like this all across the country, where there are businesses that are not maybe necessarily scaling the way that they should to kind of grow in the, the internet space of things, and not relying so much on the brick and mortar establishment of, it obviously has to be business dependent, but like I see a lot of companies in the area that I'm like, why don't you scale this? Or why don't you try to you could be doing this here, but also like boxing and shipping this out to any of the 50 states you want to, but you're not. And so I feel like, do you see a space where there's an opportunity to kind of get in and help some of these companies in the area scale and grow a little bit? Yeah.
Step one is the owner has to want to grow, just like a human being or a student would want to grow, and do not underestimate that, some people have built a business to the lifestyle level that's perfect for them.
Yeah.
And growth might mean risk that they don't want to invest in.
That's fair.
And so just like humans, we're all happy with who we are right now. Do we really want to, get faster, quicker, thinner? We all have bits between our ears of like, what is our North Star? So a lot of storytelling gets into someone's motivation. And I'm fascinated personally with my own motivations, my children's, my wife, you, Johnny. So clients who want to grow, they're Googling how to scale. They're Googling, more revenue.
Right.
They're Googling, and some of them find us at Affinity Connection, and they're calling us and saying, hey, tell a story and amplify my story. I'm ready to grow. I want to invest in growth. I want to get more geography around the state or around the country, around the world. So the growth-minded people are the ones we're trying to attract. And same with employees. I like employees that want to grow, that want to always keep getting quicker, faster, better, learning new things, continuous training. And I've really struggled in my own career trying to sell fixed-minded people on growth.
Yeah,
or
right.
fixed-minded clients
Might as
on
well
growth.
be talking to this curtain.
Well, and I've wasted a lot of my time and part of my career because I'm an idealist at heart. And I think everybody wants to grow. I think everybody wants to be quicker, faster, better. I think everybody wants to learn new skills. No. And I'm demonized for trying.
Right. And it's hard, right? Because you have to see that fixed mindset and be able to, first off, you have to be able to identify it so you can stop wasting your own time if you realize that they're in that place. And what would you say are some of the things that, like I guess the qualifiers for what you would observe in somebody who is very fixed mindset oriented?
Oh boy, we could have many a podcast on that. The red flags become apparent really quickly.
So give me like 3. Your top 3 red flags that you run into.
Usually during the interview process, or just you always watch people's actions, not what they say.
Right.
And we just telegraph through our actions, like who we are as our identity. And again, I have tremendous amount of respect for people who know who they are and want to stay the same and want to just put a guardrail and borders and
keep this thing operating just as it is.
And just you tell me what to do, give me the syllabus. What do I have to do to minimally get my paycheck every 2 weeks? And I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to give you an honest day, 40 hours a week, and I'm not gonna be on the internet all day. I'm not gonna be watching YouTube podcasts.
Right.
But I'm gonna do my job. I'm gonna turn that screw for you, and I'm gonna do it perfectly.
Yep.
You need those people.
Yeah, of course. That's essentially like the
technicians of the
perfect
world.
working gear in a machine.
Yeah, you need those. And in my career, I didn't probably appreciate enough of that. And at my age of 65, I think I'm now appreciating that you need all types. You need 6 different working geniuses. There's a book out calling the 6 types of working geniuses. You need them all. Things like you said about billing that you don't like to do. Other people love to do that. You got to work with them and you got to stay the hell away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's emotional to you to go ahead and bill, and you're going to put that off. I'm the same way. I always think I'm charging too much or too, so I don't do it. I don't collect receivables like I should. But so you just have to get everybody in their sweet spot.
Yeah.
I don't want to say there's red flags. The red flags are really to me that I've always wanted to take someone who's very happy being a technician and saying, don't you want to go up to management?
Right.
And then you can manage more technicians. And don't you want to get involved with the vision and kind of the goal setting? And I'm sure you have ideas on how to improve our processes. There's this process and system to get those things done that I've not been good at, and so I have not assembled a well-functioning, capacity expanding, scalable team of humans myself. I like to partner with other firms to scale.
Well, you've seen that dynamic work too. So to some degree, you also can say like, hey, if I'm having difficulty with doing that internally, it is probably smarter for me to partner externally with people that are going to be able to execute in that regard.
Who have a passion for billing, who have a passion for video, who have a passion for data processing or opening envelopes and processing money. I do all the above through others. And it's taken me many painful experiences of trying to do a lot of that stuff myself with my skill set. I test through all these diagnostic tests as someone who loves to galvanize. I love to get excited and I love to get others excited. And I love to charge a North Star in a mountain.
Well, I also feel like I operate at my peak creative level whenever I'm around other people that are in that kind of operating mindset. That mindset. Yeah.
Now that grates on someone who's a discerner or who's somebody's a technician that just wants to do their 40 hours a week. Galvin and I are walking into their workplace and they don't want that.
I want galvanized.
Yeah. Everything's fine, Greg, get the hell out of here. And so now what I frustrate on are a lot of the administrative operational things. I shouldn't be doing those things. Now, my point of all this to anyone listening is know thyself. Do all the tests of your personality test, your temperament, your culture index, your 6 geniuses. And it'll tell you, I like to come up with new products. So I test really well as kind of an inventor of products and solutions. And I test well as a galvanizer. I test terribly as a guy that can grind every day to
do the same thing
done every day. So I tried my career to be doing that. And in fact, I thought I should mitigate my weaknesses and spend all my time on my weaknesses.
Fixing them.
I should have ran with my strengths. I'd be further along. And, you know, and
that's a pretty powerful thing to say, man. Like that idea of not focusing on your weaknesses all the time. Like there are, obviously you should always be self-auditing and be working on things that you can and think you should be along the way.
Outsource it.
Yeah, just go to therapy.
No, outsource it. Don't do your own taxes if you suck at it. Use HR Block.
Right.
You know, and I have made a lot of mistakes and lost lots of money trying to spend valuable time in my career doing things that I suck at. Because I was the owner. I was the CEO. I had to do it. Well, why did I have to do it? I should have been
somebody early
hiring people to do that and then supporting them and quit trying to transform them into something that was more like me. Let's have ideas. Let's invent. No,
and
do the damn job, and I'm going to celebrate you for being excellent at it.
And internally, right? Trying to change yourself to be somebody that you weren't already kind of inclined to be, right?
You're lost decades.
And the reality is, like you said, if you would just, you know, quadruple down on your strengths,
fly with my
you can do so much more damage because you're doing these things that are literally already banging on all cylinders and going the way you want to go.
I at Airwalk was sponsored by the owner, George John, to do nothing but galvanize and invent. And we grew from 16 to $200 million. The biggest bozo movement of my career is I said, well, I'm going to be the CEO and buy a company, and I'm going to run all facets of it as the chief executive officer. I'm one hell of a chief marketing officer. I suck as a CEO.
But you know what? That ability to self-analyze and observe and say that keeps you from being able to be like, no, I got to get better at the CEO thing. I got to get better at this.
Right. And so I'm so excited at age 65 after taking all the strength finders, the 6 working geniuses, Myers-Briggs, Culture Index. They all said the same thing. I'm a promoter.
Yeah.
Why the hell am I managing people who are my accountants, the processing money, trying to shake loose people who are really good at their jobs? I can galvanize them and get excited, but I got to stay away from the stuff that I ruin.
Right.
And so to any 22-year-old out there, you know thyself and run with your strengths and stay away from your weaknesses and things that frustrate you. And there's a lot of things going around. Scott Galloway, I read a lot of his stuff about passion. And he's really bashing people like find your passion. He's saying that's bullshit. And he's got empirical data that
supports that
this commencement address is go find your passion. That's bullcrap. You got to do things like this podcast, and you got to do project management. And if you start getting good at it, then the passion comes.
Right.
So my passion is helping clients raise $3 million by galvanizing their 1,000 members for a North Star, and then I'm going to support them to get there. Yeah. I love it. And I could tell stories of great success doing that. Airwalk, I loved galvanizing and growing that company to 200 million and expanding it globally for young teenagers to wear the Circle A. But boy, my painful days of dealing with cash flow and payrolls and
all the things that suck out the life and the wind from under your wings of what you're really good at too.
And then hiring people who were good at it and then trying to support them. I wasn't a good supporter. I wasn't a good sponsor. I wasn't a good leader and a manager for them. As I teach servant leadership, I'm looking at all the times I have screwed up in my career because I didn't understand. And I'm, like I said, I've taught the class for 15, 16, 17 years. I think I finally have
gotten the lesson and how I wasn't practicing the stuff I was teaching. It's easier to teach than to do.
Certainly. And to do, and, a lot of my students say, hey, Greg, you had all that glory. You were Young Entrepreneur of the Year in 1984. And you did Stand Up Joe and the Twins posters and you won all these awards. What's it like to have peaked so early in your career? And I go, what?
First off, I don't know if I appreciate you putting it that way.
And I go, those were all just part of the processes that have gotten me to here. My best years are ahead. And they go, well, you're 65. And I go, my dad still works at 91. As an idealist, and full of hope is that now I finally learned what servant leadership is. Now I finally learned how many blind spots I have and how many weaknesses I've had because I have failed so many freaking times that I'm smarter now than I was to not make the same mistakes where I've chewed up the wrong employees,
Right.
that I've put way too much pressure on them, that I didn't support them properly, that I didn't give them the air cover and the sponsorship that I had at Airwalk, for example, and that how I've messed up.
Well, that
And
tertiary
that makes me valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes from the tertiary understanding you said at the beginning, right? Like when you really kind of internalize and figure out for sure and know it, that everybody's just hardwired differently, you can start realizing where you can get out of your own way when you're trying to sort of like, you're basically holding yourself up or creating pitfalls and obstacles and things like that for yourself just by trying to control or alter the way that something is just naturally and intrinsically going to go. You said about, you try to do the project management thing, try to do all these things, like finding your passion. That's kind of almost the same as the dichotomy between, motivation and discipline, because discipline is what's going to lead you to what you would call, I guess, motivation, but really people are searching for it as like a drug, right? This thing that I can just, maybe if I watch these motivational videos, I'll get hyped up and then I'll get gassed up and I'll go out and I'll go do the thing. And the reality is sometimes and I learned this through music, that sometimes even when I don't feel like writing, it's important for me to go and spend like 2 hours just sitting at a computer, looping this section that I need to write to, and just spend some time either hating it or learning to kind of throw things at it and improvise and come up with something, because just showing up is 90% of the work, I think, sometimes. Yeah.
And that discipline, that's a key word to this whole thing, is to find the North Star of what you test and you're in flow. You're in your zone where you lose track of time. And that's your strength. That's your special power. And then you want to be matched with the adherence, discipline, project management, taskmaster who loves to do all the stuff that sucks the flow out of you.
Yeah.
And that's why collab is so important. Collab or die is if you're a solo practitioner without all four tires pumped up in your Lamborghini, you're going to go in circles.
Yeah.
And that's what we have all done as inventors or entrepreneurs, is sometimes we don't have the right partners. We don't have the right advisors. We're not honest with ourselves. We try to take on too much ourselves. And then all of a sudden
Guilty.
we're not doing I'm guilty here. We're not in flow of what we're really good at.
Yeah. And I think it's just as important to identify where and when that flow, that being in flow place really is. Cause that's like, you really have to kind of lock in on that and start. It's mostly like an absent-mindedness. I think when you're not aware of it as it's happening, you just know like, oh, I get things done. It's easy when you're looking at the macro of everything and being like, well, these are all the things that are kind of all the little mechanical gears that are going on in my world. But when you stop and look like, but these are the 6 gears that I really run. Like these are the ones that are I'm at optimum efficiency and output as a, not as like a vessel of being output only, but like just in the process of whatever you're trying to create or do in your world. If you can acknowledge where you're in flow and where you're really banging at your best. That was one of my very first lessons from my mentor, Jeff Hoffman, again, just to bring him up, was it's not about what you can do really well. It's about what your team can do really well. You just have to do what you do really well and be surrounded by a team of people that are complementary and all the other angles of things that need to be done well also, all rowing in the same direction. Right. That's when you can benefit from galvanizing an entire team of people that are already basically really good at what they do. They just need that North Star mission point to kind of go after.
Yeah. And this Mr. Hoffman, he's the founder of LinkedIn.
I don't think he's the founder of LinkedIn. I would be surprised to find that out, but he started Priceline in the early 90s.
Priceline. Okay. Reed Hoffman, I think, started Netflix. I don't know. That's why I'm thinking, who is this Hoffman guy? But he's a famous guy.
Yeah. I mean, and that was his 5th successful startup company. His first one was a software engineering company that he had no intention of selling. Like he was happy doing that until he got offers to buy the company out that he was like, I liken it to riding a bull. The selling of Priceline to American Express was basically what made him a billionaire. And he was like, they say it's like riding a bull. He's like, that 8 seconds that you're on the bull for me was about 4.5 to 6 weeks of them going back and forth and being like, this is what we'll do. And he was like, no, he's like, eventually they made me an offer where I was the asshole if I didn't take the deal. Right. So he was like, and I didn't intend it to get that high. I really wasn't intending to sell, but he's like, eventually you kind of look like an idiot if you don't. So I did.
And what he said to you, and I know you have it on tape now, getting everybody to row in the boat together towards the North Star. That is so templatable in such a formula, such a recipe, that we all still are working to learn how to do
Because
when you're a business owner.
but it also gets attached to the people, right? Like that recipe now might require you to remove this ingredient to put an ingredient in that makes it better. And it's hard to make those choices sometimes. So there's like a myriad number of reasons why people don't continue to grow or actually fix things along the way.
Well, and what I'm trying to share with students and your audience is the template is there. The template is there for happiness in life. The template is there on how to scale a business. But it's damn tough to pull off.
Yeah, it's definitely not.
Blueprint is there. I mean, we're broadcasting from a house that was a Sears catalog template that was shipped in mail to a local builder to build this building.
No way. I didn't know that. I just learned that.
Sears catalog house where all the houses on this street, the Amazon of its time was the Sears catalog,
Yep.
where you would get a blueprint on how to build that porch in these little peaked roofs and everything. It was a blueprint.
That's crazy to me.
So think about life. There's a blueprint that's been written, and there's a blueprint on how to scale a business that you could Google and get today.
Right.
Which comes down to what Mr. Hoffman said. It's getting 6 people to row in the same freaking direction with their unique flow skill sets that you need in every aspect of running a successful business. And as these startups happen, you need to build out that team or have a team of suppliers who fill those roles to have a winning team to be able to solve problems in business. And if you do it, your consumers come to you and they'll pay ever increasing prices for you to solve their problem.
That's where there can be scalability if you're trying to scale.
But the frustration and the excitement of the creative tension is you don't have to invent the blueprint on this house. It's a Sears catalog house. You can go build this in another town using these same blueprints, and you don't have to hire an architect. You don't have to like bang your head against the wall. And
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
See, here we got my watch talking to me. But so that's the point I kind of reiterate with my students is that the blueprints that in any aspect of your life has been written. Are we smart enough to follow it?
Right.
What is wrong with us that we don't want to follow it?
I think it's hard, right? Because we get caught up in this world of like innovation being like the key to everything. But I think the innovation does specifically play a very important role in the entrepreneurial space because I think you have to be innovative to be competitive. And so it's like this, I would imagine, and I guess my personal experience is it's like an ongoing battle between the tried and true and what may be this new innovative approach to trying something that may be better. And it's just now I got to implement a new set, one best practice in my list of other best practices that will change the way I fundamentally function. But innovation is really kind of tied to entrepreneurship in a way that is like, it's almost inextricable. Like it has to be a part of it. So we said earlier, like if maybe the business doesn't want to scale, they build it to where they're comfortable and they don't have any intention of growth.
They got a great restaurant. Why put a new wing on it?
Right. But that doesn't mean that they're exempt from this idea of still needing to innovate to maintain sort of like, currency in the climate of the other ecosystem.
To stay relevant, yes. You have to continually listen to the marketplace. And ultimately in all these discussions, the marketplace is who I have the most respect for. They're the voting booth of if you're successful or not.
It's the court of public opinion for purchasing, basically.
Exactly. They're voting with their dollars that you have stayed relevant, that you've been innovative enough to not want to go across the street to this service provider because they're quicker, faster, better.
Right.
We're always in this battle to be quicker, faster, better, or go smaller and have a high price for smaller boutique services.
Yeah.
But all of these things are decisions that each entrepreneur has to make, each human being has to make.
Because I've seen you have to deal with this with people that I've brought to you and with people that I'm sure come to you already, I wanted to ask you what advice you have for entrepreneurs that are seeking funding or investment opportunities for some of their ventures. Because I feel like everybody that has an idea immediately goes to now I just got to get money phase of this and then go out and start telling people my idea. And aside from like the tangible aspect of like, you need to have a business plan in place of how this is going to function. What are some of what would be your advice for people that are trying to fundraise and develop things for a company that they're thinking about starting? And obviously that varies depending on the company too, I'm sure.
Well, the Lean Startup is a great book on how to have a minimal viable product, how to go to market as soon as you can with a minimal viable service or product to test if people are going to give you cash for that solution. And your number one funding source, no matter when or whatever stage you are in your company, is called a customer.
Yeah, perhaps you've heard of it.
Perhaps you heard of it. Well, I say that almost in a snarky way because so much of podcasts and those dispensing information and even Shark Tank is that if you have an idea, you must put a pitch deck together and go raise money.
Right.
Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, and it's not true. And I mean, it helps. Certainly, you could do it that way. That is a method that I'm sure works.
I think the statistic is so tiny on where you get venture capital for your idea.
Yeah.
That I always mention. I put a slide up to the students that getting funding from venture capital, I think, is like less than 1% of how products come to market.
Right. How many angel investors do you know right now? Okay, so who did you plan on going to?
You might get, they call them friends and family, might give you some seed money or run up your credit cards. But ultimately, the best way to fund your company is called revenue from customers who are delighted with your solution and they're validating at the polling booth called capitalism. And other than that, you're going to be raising money to say, I'm going to get customers. Well, why not get customers from the beginning? Well, now those things, well, I need to build a nuclear plant that's going to cost $80 billion. Okay, we'll go raise the money then. You know, but as far as creating a service or a solution or an app, you can get rolling right away and get customers to give you. Michael Dell, when he started Dell Computer, he was a college student at University of Texas. And his genius was that he would get the components of a computer, but he'd go to his fellow students and say, give me money up front for this computer.
Yeah.
So he'd get his cash up front and he'd pay his suppliers in 30, 60, 90 days.
Yeah, net 30s, net 90s. So he cash
flowed Dell Computer out of people paying for the computer in advance.
Yep.
And then he'd pay his suppliers to put it together. And he cash flowed it.
Yeah, smart marketing too. And dude, it's a Dell, or like all those campaigns that they had before. The guy who was the original Dell guy got caught with like a weed or something like that, and then socially ostracized. But I mean, my first computer was a Dell, and that was the primary selling factor for my mom, who, you know, I was a computer nerd, so I wanted one that had a little bit more in specs than a lot of average computers in the stores around here were.
Right. And he was up against IBM computers, and you know, I guess. But what year did you buy this Dell?
I would say it would have been 2001, 2000.
Now, he started in his dorm room in like 1980.
Right.
And so many of these stories that young people are fascinated with is that you bought it in the year 2000 when you're seeing all these amazing commercials.
Right.
But he was doing it out of his freaking dorm room, selling it to his University of Texas people. And then he probably started spreading out a little bit. You know, Zuckerberg started at Harvard, you know, selling a little Facebook page to only exclusively Harvard students.
Yeah. And when I joined, it was like maybe a few weeks after he had opened it up to other universities. It was by invite only. You had to have somebody who sent you a code to be able to start your Facebook. So that was when I started mine. And now I remember being like, oh, this is I thought the app was going to die when they opened it up to like high school kids and parents to join. And it obviously did not. It totally shifted away. A lot of like advertising worked a lot for digital advertising versus like your traditional print and media.
But in both cases, market validation. You know, you having traffic for this YouTube and podcast is the voting booth of your future success if it can expand and grow.
Right.
Like, you know, if in 6 months you have 2 people, your mom and sister watching, you know, you might want to pull the plug. This is a commercial venture. You're in the entertainment business and you're going to need traffic. And there's nothing more exhilarating and exciting to watch and see what you're doing here. But you're not out saying, I need to raise $50,000 for like all kinds of new equipment. You're validating that there might be an audience for Collab or Die, for people listening to your interviews. And that's what's happening on TikTok. I mean, those people making money, God bless them. They have entertaining content.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy that goes up and starts playing songs to strange women. Yeah. I love that guy. You know,
what's interesting is like in this space, what I'm selling is really conversation and output of information and really data. And so it is weird to me that I'm not selling a physical product. And so for me, the marketing aspect then should be easier in some regards, right? I have nothing to worry about when it comes to product development, packaging and shipping and any distribution aspects of it outside of the digital distribution for all of the media, which I had a full firmly, grasp on before I started. But then it makes it a very interesting question on what makes this a successful business model. Like for me, just like with music or any sort of like media creation, the value, how much something can be valued is based off of how many people are paying attention to it. And the only way to scale that is to get more exposure. And music and a lot of media entertainment like this has specifically gone down this avenue where if you don't actually pay to digitally distribute and market your podcast to people that you can, selectively tailor and keyword target down to the, local, I could get the guy across the street to see this ad nonstop for a week if I wanted to. That is like the metric for how you can grow and scale outside of just the word of mouth doing it. And so partly, doing the different interviews with different people in different industries, that kind of helps because whenever they share the social clips or they share the episode, then maybe there is some of that word of mouth growth and reach. And I am experiencing and seeing that happen, on the back end of the analytics of everything. But like I said, I'm also trying not to dive too deep into it so I don't start sweating that I didn't hit that growth curve that I really wish I had or whatever. I'm not, because I don't know how any of it's going to work. I don't have enough data. I just launched the podcast in March. I started filming my first episodes in November. So come March of this upcoming year in 2024, I will then at least have a small sample of data from which to pull and say, these are episodes that did really well. This is, I have to kind of wait, and I'm in this data collection phase where it's like, I just got to continue to do what I'm doing. And then when I have enough information to be able to internalize, come back and look at it and say, this is what I like, this is what I want to keep improving upon. And I'm doing it every week anyway.
Right.
It's just one of those things where it's like, it's interesting to me that there's no physical commodity of something to sell. And so the name of the game for me is exposure. So how do I get that exposure? It's like, well, I'll have different people on and bring a collection of these thoughts because I think that you say a lot of things that I think pertain to people, whether they're starting a business or not. I think you should be aware of what your strengths and weaknesses are and stop focusing on your weaknesses all the time. Like that helps somebody, whether they're in a business capacity, operation or not. But in this case, it's really difficult to think about. I've always been amazed that as for being in a band and doing music and doing so much different art and creative endeavors, I don't know how to do outside of maybe like a few random articles in the Collegian that they like interviewed us for things. I don't know why I've never had the local newspaper like cover me for something or something that I've done artistically with music or with, video or whatever. And that is always kind of like, I figure someday when we get like a publicist who is really worth their salt, the one thing I really, really want is to have like a write-up of me in the Center Daily Times. And like print media is all but dead. So it's not like it's really going to do anything for me. But the fact that it has never happened is just driving me insane slowly inside. Like, how do it's like when I'm trying to grow and scale, and my only way to really do that is through exposure, because streaming and revenue is what pays.
Let me ask you kind of, if you were a client, if you were to have a story written in the local newspaper, what would you want the reader to do? What would be your call to action once they're exposed to your amazing career as a singer in a global band? What validation would you look, or would you want people then to come to watch your podcast? Would you want to be hired for weddings? What's the goal?
I just
What's
would
the
like
North
them.
Star?
I've seen them do articles on other bands that are just doing random. Oh, this band is playing a show in town and they do a thing.
Do you want more gigs in town?
No, I want
What do you want? What do you want?
When I'm a band from this area and we get invited to play a festival in Indonesia, that's like not a lot of people from this area have been invited to play an international music festival. Why would
So the 25,000 people that are going to read the article online
might be like, oh, I've never heard of this band and they're playing this. They got invited to play this festival out of the country. I'm going to go check them out. And at least then it would be like I had I feel like I've never had local community support when it comes to like anything I've done outside of your endeavors of working with me. And it is so frustrating because I feel like I know the capacity to which there are so many different avenues and nooks and crannies of, businesses and attention spaces that exist in this area. And I feel like some of them are so abhorrently disconnected that they don't realize that they could be growing together by being a little bit more interconnected in the way that they communicate with each other or operate together.
And I applaud you for that statement. And we will write a story on you on Happy Valley Industry. And we have a relationship with our local paper where they pick up stories from us and run it in the Sunday business section.
Oh, see,
so
I'm in.
We're in once we go through a series of questions on, again, like we talked about during this podcast, so like, who's the audience?
Yeah.
What do we want them to feel and do? And what's the call to action? And how will boats rise because of they're reading this story? How will their life benefit? And what problem are we solving that we're going to attract people to click on your website or to click on my website or to call Johnny. You know, those are the kind of the discipline of adherence of how to write a story. So there's a call to action of what you want the reader to feel and say and do after they read it.
Well, I think of my story as far as like being in the musician side of things is like a real underdog story. Like I didn't come up with a very musically gifted family. Like I found music after undergrad, you know, in a professional capacity. And so for me, it's like, I think everybody likes that underdog story where, especially if it's from your area. And so when you think about just like all the things that could happen, it's like, wouldn't you want to know more about, if you care about the art and the music and the entertainment that goes on in this area, wouldn't you want to know what some band in this area that's been here for so long is doing?
So the angle, I get it, underdog story. And you mentioned art, music, video, what else? What's the benefit of you living in State College and having this global band and have all this rich experience, having this podcast Collab or Die, and having a video studio, being involved with all the things, your ultimate goal of where you're a giver, what do you want to give to the community that would make this story newsworthy?
I want to give them the same thing you're trying to give them, showing them proof of concept that it doesn't matter what you think your story is or where you've come from or where you think you're headed, that you could go pretty much anywhere you want to go with the right skill sets and practices in place. And for somebody who I mean, I came from less than nothing, and if I died tomorrow, I did better than break even. So I want people to see that there's just, to me, my biggest gripe with, I guess, a lot of people isn't against them. It's empathy for them, because I see a lot of people that don't ever take the leap, don't ever make the effort to try this thing that just seems a little off the cuff because they don't have a circle of people around them that are showing them it can be done. And it's hard if within your own personal network, you don't have anybody that's able to showcase for you, no, you can do this. Like, I love that because since I started Collab or Die, I have a few people, one that I brought on just recently, but he talked to me before about wanting to start a podcast. Somebody else who's just been seeing that I've been releasing episodes is like, hey, I have a podcast idea I want to get in. Like, do you think I could come in and do it there? I'm like, that's actually what we're scaling towards, is being able to help other people that want to start podcasts to do that.
Okay, so now you got something here. We're building a story here.
Proof of concept that like, it's not as cheesy as if you can dream it, you can do it, because that is not true.
Well, let's just go back to the start. Is you're saying it pains you, and I love the word pain. Mm-hmm. Entrepreneurs are trained to hear the word pain.
Pain points.
Pain points it's cliche. So there's a pain point. John Baker is chafed and a bit angry that he has traveled the globe, been part of the Vans Warped Tour, is in a band called Relic Heart, has many downloads, much revenue.
Millions of streams,
you know, list all the stuff. And your own local paper has not celebrated this amazing underdog story. It's a human interest story. However, after you've read it and you've established the credibility, you have a desire through podcasting, through video production, to solve this probably similar pain point for everyone else in this town who are business owners or are creative types who are living in relative anonymity, who are givers who want to help and amplify and tell stories. And you want to solve it through offering this podcast studio. And you want to give them video productions for their mom's 90th birthday that has tears everywhere. And you want their stories to be told, especially a 90-year-old who has this collection of photos that you put together for my mom's 90th birthday that everyone was crying. You know, and my dad was crying, my mom was crying, my brother was crying, and people who don't cry were crying. Because you put slides together, pictures with video and music, and it was expertly done and shown at a 90th birthday party with all the grandkids, and around that campfire, that video and the little, what are those download discs I gave to everyone?
The little thumb drives.
The little thumb drives. They're going to be showing that for another 100 years. My mom's legacy lives on, and it really captured the story of the Woodman family. And you know, one that I haven't even like looked at because it's been a year now because I was emotionally so connected to that video, and I was watching everyone's reaction to it. So you want this story to let people know that you're here to serve their own storytelling,
Yeah.
And to close that gap. And if we become a community of storytellers and interconnect through business owners and being part of a collective that all boats rise, I mean, that's a great story. That your phone might or your email might ring off the hook, say, I want in on that community. I want to be in the John Baker community.
Well, I know plenty of artists that want these things, right? Like if you're a musician, I feel bad for the kids that are in high school that don't have a venue that is
to do
open
TikTok.
To do TikTok, certainly.
Well, they want their story told. Everybody wants the light on that. Come on. And you're the guy that helps that.
But
in a professional way. You have real mics.
yeah. That's what makes it real. I just want people to see that, like, I mean, this is not what I studied or went to school for. This is not, I didn't go to school for music. I didn't go to school for video production. And I found myself in a lucrative career in doing that through being curious up front, right? And finding that, I'm in a generation of people that were raised by consuming media. So, of course, if you can look at what you want the end product to be for a client, if I'm making a video or if I'm a band and I want to make a video, I can find out what I need to deconstruct from that to get to there. And I just think there's not a lot of that space, that creative space for people in this area to be able to utilize that resource and truly benefit from it.
So you want to start a creative space that's open to the public to come in and be a part of this artistic talent that can take a community, which is mainly an engineering-minded community, and bring art to science.
Well, I also look at it like, I know for a fact that there are people that are here that have, millions of followers on TikTok or Instagram or this, that, and the other thing, much like I would look at, whatever videos we produce for Penn State football that they distribute through their website, they should also be distributing on a listserv of emails to those athletes so that they can post it, because functionally that is recruiting for them. And so in the same capacity, these creators that come here for college and don't create for a few months a year because they're at college and all their stuff's back home and they can't move it all into their dorm or whatever, there's a space for where they could be doing that would function for recruiting here for Penn State, for industry.
And you want to be the leader of this.
I don't think I necessarily want to be the leader of it, but I want to see it facilitated.
Do you want to be the Pied Piper? You want to be the music man?
Absolutely.
No pun intended, right?
Yeah, but like that.
Well, that takes courage.
And it
takes a North Star story that drum has to be beaten, and you'll have to be an evangelist to make it happen. And that's what entrepreneurs do.
Yeah.
Is the pain big enough that you want to solve it and you want to do these squiggly lines to make it come true? Now, I have heard others have a similar vision, but I always watch that who's going to actually do it. Who's going to actually pull it off and not just, I use a hand gesture of just talk about it and actually do it. That's what entrepreneurs do. That they see a need and they fill a need. And that was a compelling, passionate little talk you gave there. And you could play it back a couple times and look at it. And there's your snippet on being the leader of that movement. And it's a movement, and you can use the word collective, you can use community, artistic, all the ingredients are there, a facility, you got Axman Brewery, you got this beautiful Sears catalog house. There's a lot of people waiting for someone to say, let's go. And that person has to have vision, a mission, and more importantly, courage.
And I'm going to need a team of people behind it, because it's not something I know. I know I can't do this by myself, but I know that there are people in different areas. I haven't maybe met them all yet that have the ability to basically see the story, see the vision, and also understand that they have a role in it.
You want that story in the CDT. You want to light the match. You want to, I always tell clients, you got to put a stake in the ground.
Yeah.
And you got to assume success, and you got to see it and be it and do it. And that's what leadership is. And that's what entrepreneurship is. And it's a mindset. You ask questions like, what's the worst that can happen? Will I be vulnerable? Will I be the idiot that says this is a need and I'm going to go fill it and join me in this escapade or this adventure? That's what I have to, as a 65-year-old every day, face is like, how bad do I want to do that? Am I a squirrel chasing a goofy acorn? Is this something meaningful to me? Does this bring me purpose? Is this something that is going to be validated by the market? Are all these college kids going to be renting the studios and the facilities? Is the creative community going to work together? Or are they going to all bite each other's back and screw it up? All those things take leadership, management, the 6 geniuses that you need on a team that all have different skill sets. And all of those people because it's an artistic collective, the thing about artists, or what's the knock on artists?
Which one?
Beyond starving.
Yeah. Besides the starving artist, I mean, yeah. What
you
are the
guys work
stereotypes?
for purpose and not money. You guys work for vision. You guys work for emotional reasons. You guys work for your craft. You guys are freedom seekers because you don't want to work for the man. You know, you're independent wackos, and you're artists.
Yeah.
And you want to gather them all together under one roof, at least in a network that can come together on projects. It's needed. I do it for a living. I work with you, and I work with writers, and I work with designers, and I'm a orchestra leader of artists.
Yeah, but that's what you're good at doing, right? Like in that capacity, you have to work with all of them.
I'm good at assembling them, and I really enjoy the ideation with them, and I love, putting my thumb up or down, and I love being around you artists. I get a lot of dopamine from that because it's part of creating good stuff.
Yeah,
that's going to have an impact and tell the story.
Which is where your flow state really exists.
But as far as managing you guys and coaching and sponsoring and disciplining and adhering and getting on your schedules and cajoling and galvanizing, it's exhausting.
Yeah, I'd want you on the board, not to run the company, but I would love to have you on the board. And that's what I think it's going to take is like there are so many different boards around town that handle so many different things. They do.
Boards blow. I hate boards.
I feel like they get constructed in ways that are not as beneficial.
You get a good board. That's what I'm saying. Board of people that do stuff and not just talk about it.
Right.
Boards that just don't scare you not to do things. Like I was in a meeting today where we just talk about boards of directors, and they said this and that, and I go, oh man, I could never survive on a committee of people. And the discussion, by the way, was how do we promote Happy Valley?
Which seems like a question that I would imagine comes up a lot here because we don't necessarily do the best job of it as a community, as the Happy Valley community, of really kind of boastfully putting it out there in a way that I think gains traction. But I think a part of what doing the podcast and doing the music and all these proof of concept things that I like to do, that is I believe in my eyes, is the beginning stages of what grows into that creative collective space that I'd like to see developed here. And it's going to take, like you said, like I don't have to have investors to get $50,000 worth of equipment to then start the podcast. It's like, I
bet you have $200,000 equipment in all the artists in this town.
Yeah, I mean,
you probably have 40 in this room right now, and each guy you talk to that call me all the time ready to do video, I get a call a week from people wanting to do video and photography for me, and my job is I don't have time to get back to them all. One guy just called me last week. I think I sent you his email saying this guy's like a video guru. He's got all kinds of equipment. You want to be the collective guy. He can bring his own equipment.
Yeah.
And you want me to get a warehouse to stick it all in. That's the easy part.
Yeah,
the tough part is the North Star and being the evangelist and getting everyone together and then having people pay you to do cool stuff. And there's a template for that, as I've said, and it isn't that hard, but it takes courage and it takes a visionary and it takes a goofball to go through the adventure to get it done.
Well, hopefully I'm that goofball.
Well, you've talked about it now for a while. You've had some people from those My Hero Zero people. Whatever became of their Axman Brewery studio?
The 80,000 square foot space. It was amazing. I think we were just it was still during COVID, and then the people that were renting the space out were like going on vacation. I think
that was like freaking 18 months ago.
I know, but when it peters out, it's like, we forget to go back and re-engage the conversation. And
you just reignited it on this live podcast or whatever, where there's no editing. So you're going to share that vision with them, see if they get back to this beautiful table and do it.
Yeah, that's the plan.
I mean, but we're all getting old.
Oh, yeah. You're telling me by the second, it feels like.
And as I said, my best years are ahead of me. Certainly, I've been in this space my whole career, especially at Airwalk, where you need video, you need storytelling, you need podcasts, you need social media, you need artists. And all those artists need managed and come in on deadline, on time, and with quality work. And the market will write checks and keep it fed. It's a nice collective of artists. And I'd be very much interested in being a client or paying it or helping fund it. But I mean, that's why I funded this studio, is that the seeds are here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't one, thank you enough for allowing this space to exist. Cause it's been nice to be able to me, I function well in a situation where like I'm not at home. Much like for me with writing music, I would rather go to a studio and not be in my home studio so that I'm apart from all of the distractions. And so when I come here, it's like, you know, I've got Gretchen and Juliana down at the end of the hallway there, and you and Chris are upstairs. So it's like, I know people are all here doing work. And so I come here to do my work, and having a space is, you know, it seems like it's not that big of a part of it, but it's actually like an instrumentally large part of it for me, because it also creates headspace. And so I can't thank you enough for allowing me to set up in here. And I'm looking forward to being able to scale this out to people that are looking to start podcasts and being able to generate revenue from you for this room existing in the first place.
Well, a lot of what you crafted a very nice vision and a mission about why this space can be just one small part of a bigger space.
Right.
Or and the space doesn't have to be like in one building now with AI and just everybody being connected. You don't have to be in the same building, but the spirit of the collective can be together, from artists from in Central PA or even from beyond, that come together to do good work in things that you eloquently stated in this podcast that has to be put on some type of piece of paper. And my investment in this was to help seed that concept, which I agree needs to be done.
Well, I think that's a testament to the years of you understanding and seeing how things are developing and knowing where that there's like a missing link in an area that could be filled, and, you know, see a need, fill a need.
Well, and there was somebody sitting in this chair. You weren't here, and I had him sit here. He has built TV studios all over the world, and he's moved to State College. He'll be here next Wednesday at 3 p.m. And I showed him this studio, and he showed me examples of studios that he's built for NPR. It's like live right now down in DC, that your skills and his skills and the capacity of even you two guys teaming up on this collective allows me to use your services quicker, faster, and better for all my clients.
Yeah. Can I get him on the books? Can I meet him next week?
Yes, he's going to be here at 3:00. I may let him have the space downstairs just because I want another creative type in the building who has built major studios.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to be able to pick his ear. Yeah, and that's just it. Is like, I don't come to any project as if I know everything. I come to it with like, hey, I know some things about this. What do you know? I'm very curious to see where there's some information sharing that can take place here that benefits both of us. Because sometimes you meet somebody who does stuff like that, that's just got this like old head mentality, and it doesn't necessarily translate to things in a modern capacity, and vice versa. So it's always, I just love meeting people from all these different avenues and industries and perspectives to be able to, you know, pick their brain, and you can sort of like internalize and digest what you're able to and bring it into your own sort of curriculum moving forward.
Yeah, I think you'll like this guy. And he's got a big league past and a great resume, having done this in Miami and North Carolina and South Carolina and DC. And he's like world-renowned studio builder.
This guy's right in my wheelhouse. I can't wait to meet him. What's his name?
His name is, oh boy, I don't have his card.
That's right.
We can on my desk. He's coming in.
Tell me off
next
air,
Wednesday. Yeah, but no, you're going to get a chance to meet him. And but there's many people who would love to be a part of such a co-op collective that helps all boats and businesses rise in Central PA.
I think you're doing amazing work in this area. I love working for you because you were just as eccentric and wild and crazy as I find myself to be. And I look to you as my North Star inspiration that, you know, at 65, it's not like it's over, right? Like you're looking at it like you're coming into the best years of your life moving forward, and, you know, saying like your dad's still working. Right. Or I'm going to go back and audit some things.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, even like you said, like your dad working still in his 90s, like I don't feel bad for that in the way that a lot of people will be like, well, you shouldn't have to work still. I bet most of the people that I know in my family that have retired, my grandfather should have retired. He's in his late 80s now. He should have retired forever ago. And he's taking college classes as of like a year ago because he's just constantly inspired to learn. And he's somebody that I've always been inspired by. So it's nice to see that, you know, it's up to you. Like this idea of what defines, you know, a successful career or this or that or another, you know, any other thing. Those are all personal and internal. Yeah. So like
unique.
Yeah, comparison is the death of joy is so true, because when you try to say like, well, this person did this by 60, it's like, yeah, but there are so many other variables that go into making that the case. And like you said, they're not always overnight successes, even though it may perceptively seem like that. I'm just very, very glad that you came into my life when you did, because I was working with a company that was in a very pivotal and interesting position, and meeting you and seeing how, goofy you could be in your 60s made me have hope that, that I didn't need to like necessarily start putting on a collar and a tie to be taken seriously, and that there was intrinsic value in the work that I was doing. And you've always done really phenomenal, gassing me up and getting me excited. Even whenever you come in here some days and you're just like ready to rip shit off the wall and flip chairs. Like, I love it, because I'm never frightened by you. I'm always like, I totally understand where he's at right now. Like, I had a video a couple months ago that I was like taking a while to get back to you on getting done. And you were like, well, where's the video? And I was like, I just need like a creative briefing on how you want me to package this. You're like, we already talked about this. And like, but I was never mad. I've never been mad at anybody that I felt like was this close away from like firing me or kicking me out, because I just feel like there is always empathy and understanding with where you're at. And you are not the type of creative I am. You're a creative in a different way. And so there is sometimes a disconnect, and I've learned it early with you. So it was easy to mitigate. I'm like, okay, I get why he's frustrated. He needs this video. I need to quit trying to make this some Oscar worthy. And this is the thing you were saying to me. You're like, this doesn't need to be like an Emmy worthy piece of content. It needs to be this and this, and this is how you should structure it and put it out. And then that's it. That's all I need. And I was like, sometimes it sounds so stupid, but sometimes hearing it in that way is literally the last thing that I need to turn around and then do the thing. And then I did it, and it was done. We were happy. We moved on. And it's like, I'm just so glad that I know you, because you give me so much faith that there's credence in like how ridiculous I can be sometimes. I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. I'm not alone in that. He's like this too.
Well, thank you, I guess, in there.
I just appreciate it. You're fiery and you're passionate. At 65, like, you do not act what I would imagine in my brain is what typical 65-year-olds act like. And that is the best compliment I could possibly give you, because you are so emphatically excited about what you do and how you operate. And I love that the gears are never stopping. I love that I can text you randomly, like late at night, hey, I found a link to this thing. And then you'll get back to me like right away in the morning. You're just you've been a really great inspiration for me. And I can't thank you enough for the space you've created in your brain and in your actual physical space to have me around.
Well, thank you. And I'm trying to come back with something like, why is that? Why? That was a very nice, appreciative thank you from you. And I'm appreciative that you went into depth to try to describe the mutual appreciation for one another. But I'm always thinking I have to like dispense some advice of like, why is that? Why is it that we get along? Or you draw some inspiration from a 65-year-old? And, and things were going through my head is that work and play, the definition of what is play and what is work, that, this is play for me,
right?
But it just so happens to be called work.
Right. I'm not a workaholic just because I enjoy doing this all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm playing. This has been playful today. This has been an enjoyable discussion. It's not work. But I do want to offer the advice that I still think and operate like I'm 23.
Yeah, I don't think that has changed since I met you, and I can't imagine it changed since you were 23.
I was the same way at 23, just in wonder of business and excitement and video, or no, it wasn't video back then, but yeah, we were kind of starting to look at VHS stuff and things, and maybe that was in the 80s, but we did some video in the 80s. Did some commercials and stuff. But so why do I enjoy artists is probably the deeper question, is that I just have an appreciation that you guys are the ones that make stuff good. You bring art and video and advertising and story, all of those things. I just have an attraction for it. I can't do any of it myself. Somebody once said, Greg, you get credit for inventing these products and doing this, but they said, what's fascinating about you is you don't do anything.
You're like
when people come in and audit, like Greg, what does Greg do? Greg doesn't do anything. He doesn't do the videos. He didn't do the life-size figure. I don't do the magazines. I don't even write the stories. I just like to assemble those that can and cheer and galvanize them and cheer them on. And I don't even know if that's a career.
Well, it turns out you've made it one. You've seen a need and you've filled that need is what's happened there.
And so I do have a lot of empathy for, I always tell people, employees I struggle with, because they're the ones that have to do all the stuff that I'm not good at.
Right.
But I've always been very close to the creative community. Like, I'm still the designer that was doing stuff when I was 19 years old. His name Bill Brickley.
Mhm.
I still work with him today. He's now like 72. He does all my newsletters for me. He was yelling at me at 19 and then 20, and I'm still sending him checks. And we've been together since 1979.
That's crazy.
He did typesetting on my first posters and stuff. And he worked at the Collegian in the typesetting room where you actually did type. But I'm still working with him. Patty, I've been working with her for 20 years. Jody, Kara, all these people for like decades, you know, and if anybody ever comes to my funeral, it's going to be the people that I've done projects with.
Right.
Employees will like do this to me, you know?
Right.
But it's always the empathy I have for the people who add so much value to the finished product, the magazine, the video, the social media post. I've just always had a love and appreciation for that. You guys are the freedom seeker entrepreneurs who do this stuff and who have almost bucked society to try to maintain your love of your craft.
Yeah, much to our chagrin, 9 times out of 10, I would say, because it's just as thankless as other thankless jobs can be sometimes, because it's hard when you don't feel like people truly understand or connect or see that. I guess I could say a big part of why it's easy to be, you know, inspired by and look up to the things that you do is specifically because you are, you know, emotionally and socially self-aware enough to be able to observe those things, and not just observe them, but appreciate them for what they are and what their role really is in the grand scheme of things. Because that's kind of your grand experiment, really.
Yeah, and back to the chagrin you have, or, you know, much to a fault, you said, then back to the starving artist thing, or you do it for the love of the craft and maybe you don't charge enough. You know, I'm the son of an artist. You know, my mom is a great oil painting.
That's awesome.
Great artist, an unbelievable artist. You know, and my dad's a business guy. And so I have a lot of
well, that's where you came from then. That's
so I'm kind of like a half breed or whatever, bipolar, but I probably to a fault am too much on the artist side when it comes to undercharging for our work.
Yeah.
I am too much I'm a starving artist myself in many respects, you know, and more back to advice for you is all of the fellow artists who do work for Affinity Connection is that we all kind of share that we're independently doing this stuff because we love to do it. And we never trade that for more money. Even though we bitch all the time that we wish we had more money, we could do more cooler things. And now at age 65, I am going to shift a little more to assembling cash to be able to do cooler things versus just doing it to do it.
Right.
And to kind of show off that this is great stuff.
Right.
But, you know, so I'm kind of like dialing up more of the businessman in my advanced age.
Well, I enjoy the youthful vigor that it brings to the pep in your step every day when you come in here.
Right.
I'm excited to be able to celebrate your birthday with you next week. And just like I said, man, I'm just really glad you are a very vital person in this space to exist, because you facilitate so much that a lot of people may not ever fully understand came from your brainchild, implementing it and bringing it into fruition. And suffice to say, it does not go unnoticed by me. I think that you are a very pivotal and crucial part of this community in that regard. And I'm really just, again, like I said, thankful that you came on the podcast. You said you couldn't do 2 hours. We're at over 2 hours now.
Oh, my goodness. And it was like we were in flow. It was like 10 minutes. But I have to give you one tip, because I got to leave you with one tip on these podcasts.
Absolutely.
When you were talking about your vision of this podcast and how it might get some traction, it seems a common thread amongst all your guests, or as you're looking for advice, you're looking for common threads of lessons learned that can be passed on to
common experiences,
all tied to you as an artist, interconnected as you're the central thread. Is that what about editing down the best snippets from every one of these and turn it into a 20-minute reel of what might be common amongst all of what we're all saying?
Yeah.
I imagine there's some common threads that if you could extract 1 or 2 sentences from me. I saw Sean was on last week.
Yep.
You know, maybe this Hoffman guy, you had some musicians on. I bet there is one common template.
Yeah.
That we're all saying the same thing.
So my actual goal for when I started the podcast was every year I want to do a 2023, like sort of like a social recap, something that would end up being like a half an hour, but would basically thread and tell the story. That's something that will take about a month to kind of go through and comb through and get everything out of. Maybe less now with ChatGPT and being able to upload the transcript.
And you're going to see, I bet there are some common things that is about a mindset.
Yeah.
It is about a sense of adventure, a sense of freedom. Lewis and Clark, expedition. We're all on kind of we all enjoy the journey.
The hero's journey, man. Joseph Campbell had it down.
Well, and I think you've probably gathered a bunch of like-minded people that maybe no longer than 15 minutes.
Keeping it short. All right.
I won't even watch my own freaking 2 hours. If you
Right.
cut this thing down to 10 minutes, but there's probably 4 good sentences it might be worth it for an audience to have heard out of this 2 hours. And that's what I want to watch.
I gotcha. Well,
And I'm on YouTube a lot. And the algorithm is currently serving me up stuff on running and, cadence and stuff. But occasionally I do get into some personal development stuff and
motivational
and start
speaking
watching
and
TED Talks and things. And, but I think artist meets collab versus die. I'd be looking for what's the takeaway from all this?
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to being able to hand an episode over to you that is fully you, and maybe even to your staff and making them watch it.
No, don't. I even when I've done these before, and I have my students watch 20 minutes. They can't get through 20 minutes. They speed it up to like 2x.
Right. Yeah.
And
that's their generation.
And I make them write a reflective, 200 words on it. It's painful for them. In one of the podcasts you saw, I was talking about pure servant leadership, which was the topic of that particular class. And they go, oh, that's so long. It's so long. Remember those videos I had you edit down? The greatest movies on leadership known to man. It's 28 minutes. And they bitch that's too long.
Yeah.
And this is Glenn Ross. This is Officer. These are like the best clips
that represent the values that you're trying to portray.
No, it's just too long. I mean, and meanwhile, each one of these movies costs $100 million to make.
So part of that, I think, is you have to be able to set them up with, maybe that gets broken down into smaller clips so that as you hit the lesson, you bring up a thing and then it's a discussion on this thing and how it pertains. The longer form 30-minute one is probably it's not going to get an Emmy for the,
Well, but now here they'll also keep a log on how much they'll watch TikTok.
Right, certainly. Yeah, our phones do it. Let you know what your screen time is.
They'll do 9 hours on social media on one day.
Yeah.
Times 7 days. And I can't get them to watch 22 minutes of the greatest movie clips that their parents talk about and reference all the time. Like feed mayonnaise, feed mayo to tuna.
Right.
Now they don't know what that means.
They need to, it needs to meet them where they are is what it is. Yeah. You have to find a way to distill it into.
Put it on TikTok. Take this and chop it down to 20-second things.
Will.
And so I'm almost now in a capitalistic mindset of what to do with this stuff.
Yeah.
Is that there's something there, and that's what keeps me going.
Yeah, the macro content of the long form of the whole podcast is really that's my favorite part because that's born out of the conversation.
Right.
What you get when you distill down individual moments and conversations amongst the entire episode is I'm really looking forward to reaching 30 episodes and then going back through all of them and finding out how many 5-minute chunks of good conversations from each episode I can get out to then recycle into new micro content that is a little bit more easily digestible and then gives people credence. But hey, I really like that Greg said that thing about, entrepreneurial leadership. I'm going to watch his episode and see what else he has in there. Right. And that is the value I've distilled out of everything we have ever talked about. And the reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because I know it's in there. And I thought I would do significantly more talking on this episode. And I'm glad that I didn't because I got to let you breathe out all of this really good information that is vital for not just artists and entrepreneurs, but people that are on the fence about whether or not they want to be an artist or an entrepreneur. Some people just need to hear what's on the other side of what they're afraid is waiting for them. And I think you did a really good job of giving people incentive to be you just got to know that if you fail, that's a part of the process.
And I like that word wannabe. Because there's a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs out there.
Oh, certainly.
And we're trying to teach people to do it.
Yeah.
Don't be a wannabe. To do it, fail fast, fail forward, and and put on your resume. If you fall on your face, it's the best way to get a job.
Yeah.
And I applaud you for starting Collab or Die. If you want to get in touch with me, it's greg@affinityconnection.com. Our website is affinityconnection.com. happyvalleyindustry.com is available for those that want to celebrate the great businesses of central Pennsylvania.
And get involved. Well, thank you
Johnny.
So much, Greg. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
You're the best.
2 hours. Oh, my goodness.
Over 2. We did it. Woo!
We're always collaborating at all times with the universe.
That is a wrap on another episode of the Collab or Die podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed making this episode for you. And now it's time for our favorite part of the show, the part where I beg you to please hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode. And don't be shy. Give us a shout out on social media at Collab or Die Podcast on all the cool platforms to share your thoughts, your feedback, and your love. Until next time, Collab or Die, baby.